think the socialists and the ANCAPs will agree with me because I'm just right.
How many different spells were just cast?
You're
right
wrong, but okay.
No, we're not wrong, dude. Like,
You are wrong.
when the socialist and the ANCAP are agreeing, you're probably fucking wrong.
I'm not wrong. I'm correct.
Why do you think fractional reserve banking only refers to one specific fraction?
So what I'm saying to you is, what's the currency you think that these companies use? Since you opened your big fat mouth, tell me what the currency is called.
The U.S. dollar? I said nobody's
that,
stopping.
okay, well, no, they are stopping them. You're not allowed to have a competing currency with the U.S. dollar.
No,
you're not. You go to prison. You go to prison forever.
Absolutely. What do you think Bitcoin is?
Bitcoin's a digital faith-backed.
It's
currency.
the solution to all
It's
of
a
these
currency.
No, it's
so there's no way you can know anything, even whatever you're like.
The axiom that I presented is one that I don't think anybody here would necessarily disagree with, which is that
you don't
human beings
know it.
are rational actors.
I do disagree with that. That's
Bullshit.
great.
Wait, hang on.
What's up? So we were waiting for one of our panelists hasn't been here yet. We'll shame him with tomato cans when he gets here, but we're ready to get going. It's going to be great. We'll introduce you to the panelists. I do have to say real quick before we start, I want to give a shout out to Petra and Sick Parvis for the donation of this channel to the Crucible channel. So remember, new content is coming out, subscriber only content on the Crucible every day. And I missed someone, so people could put in the chat, someone donated a ton of subscriptions and I didn't see who it was. So thank you to whoever that was. We really appreciate it. And hopefully someone will let me know in the chat who I could thank for that. Although I'm sure there'll be some scrub that's trying to take credit for it that didn't really do it. But we're going to introduce you to all of our panelists, give themselves a chance to shout themselves up and tell you where you can find it, and then we'll jump right into the debate. So for the first time on the arena, thank you so much for coming on. Was recommended highly to me. Phenomics, thanks so much. Tell us a little about yourself and where we can find you.
Hey, my name's Phenomics, or at least on YouTube or whatever. I'm on YouTube. I'm not really on Twitch. I'm also on Twitter as EA Phenomics. I'm a liberal socialist. I do debates. I talk about effective altruism and utilitarianism, ethics and politics. Yeah. And so.
All right. Thanks so much. To my right, making his second appearance on the arena, I believe was on for the inaugural show, so I'll always thank him for that. And you can see his name's actually up on the plaque for the arena there. Thanks so much for being here, Scott from Fabian Liberty.
Yeah, I'm Scott from Fabian Liberty. We're a duo stream, but I do all the debates and stuff like that. You can find us everywhere. Please join the Rumble, right? Because like we will be banned on YouTube, right? Like you're not allowed to have positions on YouTube that go against the neoliberal rainbow capitalist agenda. So, follow us on Rumble, but also you can follow us on YouTube and Twitch primarily is where we stream currently. And it's good stuff.
All right, thanks so much. I wouldn't know about getting.
I feel like I don't need like a huge introduction to the Crucible. Like you guys know me. Like when someone really wants to argue with an ANCAP, they usually bring me in, and it's fun.
Well, unless they want a smart one, then they bring Casimir. But anyways, thank you for being here. I wouldn't know anything about getting banned on YouTube.
They bring on Casimir when they want to get yelled at, when they want blood. Casimir, it's like that Russian in him, man. He just fucking loves it.
So, veteran of the Crucible, I know I've never had a chance on the Crucible to talk to him, but we have spoken before. PF Young, Paul, thank you so much for being here. Tell us a little about yourself.
Yes, I don't know. I refer to myself as an enlightened centrist, ironically, but unironically. So I have all of the correct positions on every issue. And that's all you really need to know.
Well, that's it. Debate over. There we go. Lastly,
you'll see.
My friend Counterpoints, a veteran of these panels, also has a fantastic panel show. I think on Friday nights. He can tell us a little about it if he wants. But thanks so much for being here, Counterpoints.
No, my sincere pleasure. Love any opportunity to come on and yell at fellow Twitch and YouTube political characters. I am Cotter. I run a semi-successful Warhammer 40k lore breakdown channel that's doing pretty good. We're at like 36.5 subs right now, about to break 40, so that'll be cool for us. So, looking down the barrel of some pretty exciting times on the channel. And then I also have the Counterpoints Coliseum, where we do our panel show, The Heated Hippie, every other week on Friday between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m. EST. And yeah, so if you want political debates, check out our live streams. If you want Warhammer 40,000 lore breakdowns along with some of the best violence Games Workshop has to offer, then check out the main channel. So happy to be here. Thank you kindly.
All right, excellent. So we're going to jump right in. Now, a reminder, you'll see the mods putting a link to the Crucible's Discord where you'll be able to get vetted and call in the final hour. Also, any super chats that you give will be read to the panelists. So that's what makes the show great, that the final hour is all the audience controlling the direction it goes. So the topic is, and you can take it anywhere you want because I know this is a developing story. If you don't think one person's responsible, but many, that's fine as well. But the topic is, who is responsible for the Silicon Valley Bank collapse? So we're going to start from my left to right, the same we did introductions. And then when we end with closing statements, we'll do the reverse order. So Phenomics, go ahead. You have 1 minute to 2 minutes. Who is responsible for the Silicon Valley Bank collapse?
All right, cool. So yeah, there's going to be 3 groups that are very clearly responsible for the Silicon Valley Bank collapse. The first is going to be the very obvious one. I'm sure we're all going to agree. The management is to blame. The management for over-investing in long-term securities and not diversifying their portfolio enough. We're not ready for potential shocks in the market like the interest rate hikes. The other groups that are clearly responsible, this one might get more controversial, going to be 2017 Congress and Donald Trump for repealing and rolling back huge portions of the Dodd-Frank Act. The act put stress tests in place for banks that would have made it very very difficult for Silicon Valley Bank to get away with what they're doing. These stress tests were lobbied by Silicon Valley Bank, and we since we knew that the bank was going to be solvent back in September, it would have been very easy for the FDIC under the original regulations to tell SVB to get its act together. The third group is going to be the Federal Reserve. Federal Reserve didn't raise rates fast enough in response to an obvious shock in demand, soon enough, not fast enough. And once they did start responding, they were in a rock and a hard place, and they rose rates way too fast, and that led to the variability in the market that led to the Silicon Valley Bank collapse. So all 3 of those groups are definitely have blame in the collapse. Yeah.
Okay. All right, Scott, let's go over to you. You have 1 minute to 2. Go ahead.
Yeah, so mostly agreement with Phenomics here. Yeah, I would say that the obvious kind of implication here is that Silicon Valley Bank was invested primarily in T-bills and mortgage-backed securities. I would say the banking industry, the Fed, and the entire system of fiat currency and the regulations that we have is to blame. Obviously, I don't believe in fiat currency. The idea that we treat T-bills as cash equivalents is really kind of another big problem here. It's the proof that the regulation that was kind of repealed from moving them from a Category 2 bank into a Category 3 bank from $50 billion in managed assets to $250 billion. It's proof that that's all just kind of like left-wing cope made up to try and blame the Trump administration so that they can kind of have a finger to point. Because we can look at their own 10K forms and show that they were well above the ratios, even if they were a Category 3 bank, and it would have changed absolutely nothing. So what we really have to look at is the entire industry as a whole and the entire financial system that we have. If you want to blame someone, really, well, then you need to blame the individuals that were on Jekyll Island in 1912 that led towards the establishment of the Federal Reserve in 1913. That would really be it. There's so much to talk about here. The main thing I do want to say, kind of meta-wise, is we're not out of the water yet. Just because some people in the market is kind of balanced out a little bit. All eyes are really on Credit Suisse right now. Credit Suisse getting a $54 billion bailout from the Swiss Central Bank, may stabilize them. But if the Swiss Central Bank is not willing to cough up more funds to keep them solvent, after kind of like a disastrous 2021, if they crumble and they collapse, you're not looking at a bank with $230 billion managed assets. You're looking at a bank that is a global bank that sells credit default swaps and all that stuff. And I'll just say quickly, currently managing 1.3 trillion, right? So if they go down, the house of cards goes down, and we have to look at like a lot of taxes, a lot of restructuring, and probably a depression.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much. Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, well, first off, I'd just like to say that I am making this statement on the stolen land of the Choctaw, as I am currently in Dallas. I would also I would also like to point out that everyone on this panel is white, which is why I get
Whoa.
laughs.
Wait, really?
Which is why I get, excuse me, can I? It's funny to make fun of the fact that we stole this land. But the point is, people are beating around the bush. There's only one person to blame. It's obvious, and it's George Soros. And this bank was focused on appointing woke directors. And if they hadn't focused on all these diversity metrics asked for by George Soros, the management would have focused on doing the proper duration matching with their interest bonds. So this entire conversation is a waste of time unless we get to the bottom of the issue, which is, as always, George Soros.
All right, Paul bringing the heat. Thank you so much for
truth.
stealing that land to be here today. Lastly, let's go to counterpoints. Go ahead. You have 1 minute to 2 minutes.
Yeah, I was going to be mean spicing myself. I too would like to blame Austrian Jews. So my meme answer is basically like the entire concept of fractional reserve banking, where we just like have money that makes up money that, bullshits money, then extrapolates it to the 30 thing, and then allows people, we were talking about CDOs and credit default swaps and all that kind of stuff, where we have a bunch of assholes who use terms like liquidity in order to basically trade paper thin air so they can pocket a few $100,000 back into, their pockets. So I will fight that. I do think that there does need to be a central bank, because if you look at the economic catastrophes of the 19th century, then there's a argumentative support for a central bank for a nation state. But I do think that we're looking at a Gilded Age level of lack of control, where we basically let rich assholes pay other rich assholes to let rich assholes do whatever the fuck they want. And as a result, we have this giant hand in the pocket thing where you can collapse apparently $1.3 or $1.13 trillion worth of assets because a bank is short $250 billion in liquidity and then relies on the government to bail them out. So if that's the case, rather than going decentralized, which I think is going to be probably the main points of contention, like Scott is saying, if we didn't allow these people to have this much rope to hang themselves, then we wouldn't have a problem in the first place. I would prefer to centralize and basically say, hey, these are the rules of the game. Here are the limits, and you can't play them. And also, I would like to appeal to the Christian and TradCon members of the Crucible audience and say, you should worship God, not capitalism. And also, there was a reason why usury was banned in the Christian faith, which is basically you shouldn't be able to profit from the misery of your neighbors just because you fucking feel like it. So let's return to the medieval ages. Let's chop people's heads off with guillotines, and let's get back to based Christian TradCon values.
See, I like that, right? That's how you know that he's the baby face, appealing to the audience. Phenomics, can we get you to yell at Christians for a second so everyone knows to boo you? Is it?
Christians bad. No, that's the wrong ethic.
Good. We wrapped that up. Nice. We got a good guy and a bad guy. Good. So I just want to remind everyone, I see that we got new members coming in for the Crucible. Again, new member-only content is coming out weekly. The Crucible's doing an excellent job with skits and stuff like that they're putting out that for members only. So consider signing up for a membership. And remember to get those super chats in and look for the mods to put the link to the Crucible Discord where you can be vetted to call in the final hour. With that, you all feel free, open debate, take it where you will.
Okay, yeah.
So
wouldn't this whole thing have been avoided if we use Bitcoin as our fundamental currency?
PF Young, don't come in with more. Stop.
Yeah,
So you talk.
I thought you would agree with that, to be honest.
So you talk. Well, I mean, I like some things about Bitcoin, but just a second.
Okay.
You talked about ESG as a major problem here. While I am adamantly against environmental social governance and stakeholder capitalism as an actual capitalist, right? And I do think that it is a serious problem. You even have other ESG investors saying that 915 ESG funds, roughly, hereabout, were invested in Silicon Valley Bank. And they're calling them out for saying that for being dumb and for just like positioning ESG above anything else. I think I have a quote from, let me see if I can find it real quick from, oh my God, it's, here we go, from Saja Beslik, who is like the CEO of NextGen ESG, saying, quote, all in on carbon are not necessarily managing other risks, right? And I think we saw the same thing with Vanguard, kind of like pulling back in terms of like going full force in ESG, because, you know, net and saying like, look, we're not simply just investing in net zero carbon emission ESG people, because it's just not a profitable venture. So I do think ESG does have a role to play here, in that if you're spending money, right, to invest in something that obviously isn't giving you much return, then you are wasting money that could be more properly invested elsewhere. But I don't know that it's I think because there's some decent ESG, because it's a venture capitalist firm, right? I think people maybe are leaning into it a little bit too much in this example, instead of like the unsound investment that Silicon Valley banking was doing, and also just the system as a whole and how much of a house of cards our financial institutions are.
Okay, I gotta get in here.
Did George Soros pay you to say that? Out of curiosity.
True, so real.
It's a distraction. Hold on. Why are they appointing? Why do they care what the diversity demographic makeup of the diversity board is?
I don't know.
There was effort was put into that could have been put into risk management.
I feel like
that's said
not a
that.
factor.
I agree.
I literally said that.
Shilling for
Could have had brown people do it. Who cares? FL Scott and counterpoints. I gotta push back here. I'm assuming your alternative to fractional reserve banking is full reserve banking.
No, okay. So I'm partially memeing. And this is I'm actually mostly memeing. But
Okay, good.
So I think fractional reserve banking and fiat currency gives you a lot of flexibility that you don't have with a gold standard currency or with a a non-fractional system, all that kind of stuff. But I do think there's something to be said where we've basically let these people run away, and they got away with it in 2008, where they just complexified products to the point that nobody could understand them. And as a result, they made a bunch of horrific bets. They basically tanked the economy for 4 years. Hundreds of thousands of people shot themselves in the foot. There is consumer responsibility as well. So, for instance, if you take out a $500,000 loan on a house, you're making 20 grand a year, and it's a variable interest rate that's going to kick in 20 years, and you don't read the contract. There's consumer-based malfeasance as well. But at the same time, what's really going on is there's kind of like this 1980s Reaganist greed is good mentality, where just as long as people are making money, nobody gives a shit. And my only beef with ESG isn't that like conscious capitalism or stakeholder capitalism. It's just that I think that they have the wrong values. I don't give a shit about trans drone pilots or fucking brown fractional reserve investment bankers. I care more about like, do we have a sound, sustainable system that isn't just going to make people short-term profits? It's something that's actually going to be a competent fiduciary steward for coming generations of investors. And I just think that we need to have somebody who has fucking balls, who doesn't care if he gets shot with the CIA heart attack gun, to stand up to these fucking cunts and say, fuck you, it's enough. Stop fucking with people's wallets, and you're going to do smart shit from now on, even if it's not as profitable.
Yeah, I agree. FDR and Lyndon B. Johnson started to build us a really, really good system. But of course, the lobbyists are able to get into every aspect of the bureaucracy, and we end up with what we had in 2008.
So to answer your question directed towards me, am I a proponent of full reserve banking? I do think full reserve banking is better in some situations. I think fractional reserve banking is better in others. The problem is that the state has a monopoly on the currency that we use. They say you get one currency, right? I mean, even like, yes, there's Bitcoin and things like that, but Bitcoin isn't really sold or traded or really used that much as a currency, right? Like,
yeah, because
money
George Soros puts propaganda out like you and your mouthpieces for it.
Yeah, I'm a big George
You
Soros
got to slow down with the memes.
as an anarcho-capitalist. Like, relax, right? Like, I understand that like you might be a little bit out of your element, so you have to meme to make points. But listen for a second, you might learn something. So, like, as far as I'm concerned, real money acts as a commodity. And fiat currency doesn't really act as a commodity. And right, like when demand is high for the currency, right, like prices of goods and services should decrease, right? And vice versa. And so the problem, right? And so the problem that I have with fractional reserve banking isn't so much that fractional reserve banking is inherently bad or evil, right? Fractional reserve banking allows for intentional inflation, right? Which benefits the rich and doesn't benefit the poor and the middle class. But it can benefit everybody because it can benefit growth, right? Inflation helps with individuals that have debt. That's how the rich live. The poor live paycheck to paycheck. That's not a fucking, like, don't make faces like this is some crazy concept out of left field. It's pretty common basic economics.
No, inflation is a flat
tax.
tax. Of course it's worse for the poor than it is for wealthy people.
Right. Okay. You were like, what? I'm like, yeah, it's inherently inflationary. So what would I prefer, right, is a competition of currencies, right? And in a competitive market, you would have some people trading in commodities, right, like gold and silver, right? Some people that are using fiat currency and they have a certain trust in the stability of that currency. They're okay with the inflationary rate of that currency because it's, you know, creating some level of growth and lowering interest kind of like artificially, as opposed to interest rates should only go lower because the market behavior changes, right? Instead, what we do is we centrally plan interest rates and we hope it works out. And this is one example of it doesn't fucking work out. And so in a competitive market of currencies, some people would have commodity currencies, some people would have fiat currencies. What I would personally prefer to invest my money in is synthetic commodity money. Have you ever heard of the theory of synthetic commodity money?
Sounds like Bitcoin.
Bitcoin is technically a synthetic commodity money. The problem is that Bitcoin's algorithm is pretty, like, I wouldn't say, it's simplistic, right? The way that Bitcoin's is released, right, is really just like it's just a scale of mining, right? Like, as opposed to synthetic commodity money, which technically Bitcoin is one, as it improves, you could write algorithms that release certain amounts of money into the market based off of like the different factors in the market. And you could essentially do the Fed's job with your currency via AI. Whereas like technically Bitcoin does do that, but it doesn't change based off of like the price of a basket of market goods or like asset inflation.
You bring up a really good point that basically every left-wing monetary theorist agrees with, that like the current system of planning it, like by not planning it, by not the system of not planning it is not a great way of planning it, right? You need some sort of algorithm, and the job of the Fed should instead be to like have an algorithm in place that responds to like econometrics, right? That's not like based on just whatever.
But not in a competitive market. It's just centrally planned, right? Like I'm not talking about central planning. That's not the point I'm bringing up. They're fundamentally different.
Well, you brought up the
hold on. I gotta jump into this.
I was trying to give you credit for the one good thing you said. Okay.
Yeah. So I want to.
I'm just saying there's a principal difference. I'm with you, but I'm just saying like obviously those are wildly different when one has a monopoly on the currency that we use.
Yeah, well, okay, and so here's my thing is if you want to appeal to this, I'm actually perfectly okay with there being like private currencies that people can trade in and how they feel. I don't give a shit if Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever exists. I don't care if there's commodity currencies like gold or silver or eggs. Like if we could invest in eggs futures right now, that would we'd probably miss the bubble on that.
You should look into investment of onion futures. It's a fucking hilarious rabbit hole.
Pork bellies.
Yeah. Like honestly, I'd probably start investing in agriculture and just buy like 300 chickens and keep them in my backyard. But anyways, the point being, like, we kind of did the multi-currency system in the United States in the 19th century, and it was actually fucking horrible. So there were different states printing out their own monies. Different states would not, there wasn't like trans-state commerce because they were competing with each other. There were rug pulls because people at the bank or with the private currencies were, walking into people's houses and guaranteeing them that it was backed by XYZ fractional algorithmic system. They would have somebody buy a bunch of funny money with, commodities, gold or silver or whatever. And then they would just say, just kidding, rug pull, let's print out a whole bunch of cash and make it worth trash. Oh, just kidding. We went belly up. Oops. And so that's kind of where my thing, it's like, I still think you need a central currency. And then the question about fiat, this is where you and I are not going to see eye to eye on it. Like gold-backed currency or silver-backed currency, you can't eat gold or silver. It has a value that we associate with it, and it's stable because there's a relatively similar pool. You, of course, can mine more, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. But basically, that stability
tends to keep up with population. That's why that's another reason why it's so valuable as a commodity.
But it's also relatively still a false god, because my understanding of fiat, like the evolutionary of fiat currency when it came to the 1970s.
I'm not worshiping gold, bro.
Okay, well,
you're an ANCAP. Of course.
Yeah. So yeah. But when it came to like the 1970s with the switch over to the fiat, basically what they realized is like cars have value. like services have value. You know, everything that we trade in the market has value. So as long as you have a correlated amount of money in the system that correlates with the goods and services that are being produced, the thing that is backing a fiat currency, if it's a national currency, is the economic activity that's occurring inside the market. That's why I don't give a shit about the national debt as much as I did 10 or 20 years ago. So
Exactly, the whole economy.
Yeah,
you
but
can
no,
back
but
it.
so there's a couple of things wrong with that. Number one, you're comparing a traditionally agricultural economy, which had a lot of runs on banks and busts. And the reason is like when you say the 19th
The
century,
18th,
you're talking about, right? Like you're talking about over 90% of the economy is still agricultural.
At what point in the 19th century? This is the Gilded Age. This is the founding of
No,
industrialization.
that's 20th.
Okay.
So yeah,
That's 20th
19th,
century.
I'm
He's talking about the
1800s.
1800s. So if you're talking about
the late 1800s are the Gilded Age.
the very tail end of the late 1800s where we had multiple crashes, and all of those crashes course corrected within months. We had the silent in 1907. We had the second
course
silent in
corrected
1921
because the U.S. government was
1919.
increasingly involved, because it was the push towards the progressive era.
No, it was the involvement of the government in the silver in silver that caused one of them. Like, stop. Like, no,
So
the
yeah,
market
the government
self-corrected.
involvement in
The
one
worst.
of them causes the problem.
What
The
year
market
did
not
Soros start to get
self-correct.
active in all this?
Oh my God, stop. No, the fucking, like, when we had a serious problem
Okay.
was when the
We'll
government was
avoid the
actually
real question,
heavily
that's
involved.
fine.
Right? Like the Great Depression was made so much worse because of the government involvement. Again,
What? No, the
when you're
only thing that
talking
brought
about-
us out
when
of the
you're
Great Depression is when we got the government involved by creating a military economy to
that
get us
dude,
involved in
like
World War
that's
II.
that's
And
like
by the
elementary
Federal
school
Reserve.
shit. Like that's silly.
In elementary school, you learned that in 1945,
Yeah, you
that
learn
the
bullshit
developments-
and like all.
You learned
it's
that
not even a
FDR created a
controversial
system that
thing.
was. It's absolutely controversial.
There's plenty of
that
economists
the
that
idea-
agree that the Great Depression was made worse.
Oh,
By
sure. There's
what?
plenty of economists that were
Who
made
funds us
that agree it was
economists?
made worse.
Oh my God!
Exactly.
Yes, it all boils down to George Soros.
You can list
Thank
a
you.
bunch of good economists
Can we get
who
to
are
the real
gonna
discussion now?
who are gonna say like various different things on the subject, but I need like actual arguments here. What actually happened was that the Federal Reserve had a huge overhaul under FDR that allowed it to be much more active in the economy. That allowed it to push a bunch of money into the economy to get it started up again, so that we didn't have this like overlasting recession.
Yes,
what we
that's
had
true.
is like this,
If you
falling
if you start
profitability.
with the premise that Keynesian economic theory is correct, then you reach the conclusion that priming the pump was a good thing. Except it's not.
Okay, so how do you solve for the falling profitability under capitalism?
I think you just let people suffer and die, and who wins wins, and who loses loses. I think that's
How
the
do you
game.
solve the economic calculation problem?
But you don't need to. I'm not a planned economist.
What
like
you're
an
talking
insane-
about, you're coming out in forward of centrally planning the economy. What are you talking
No,
about?
I'm not. I'm not
No.
talking about
You
central
said
planning
you
the
said earlier
economy.
we
I'm
need
talking about
central planners
banking.
on the interest rate and on our money.
Yeah,
Like,
on central banking. We need central planners for banking. Everybody agrees with this. Anybody who's not
No,
Everybody
because
agrees.
Bitcoin can serve the role as central bank. Hold on. What is the honest issue? Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not an Austrian economist. I'm not very smart in general, but I do know who funds who. What is wrong with having, let's hypothetically say, the US bought a significant portion of Bitcoin, which caps out at 20 million. It's a fixed number of assets. What is wrong with having that be our underlying measure of whatever we describe as currency? It's not fiat anymore. It can't be printed. It can't be manipulated by central banks, but it's universally recognized. What is the
I agree
issue
that
with that?
it's
no one will.
better
It
if
will
we have
never,
some sort of
literally never
algorithm
happen.
system.
They'll wait till the
Yeah,
dollar
that's
collapses.
That's rich
and then
coming from the
and then they'll give you.
anarcho-capitalist, but
It's just not like, no, it's literally not. What's going to happen is eventually the dollar will fucking crumble, right? It'll be
Okay.
some big event. Either it might be Credit Suisse collapsing. It might be Saudi Arabia choosing to sell oil to China in yuan currency. So we're no longer reserve currency. Who knows what the fuck it is? But when that happens, right? They're going to sell you universal basic income to get through the depression, except it's going to be in the form of CBDCs, right? Like they're not going
In
to
the form
buy
of
and
what?
adopt Bitcoin, central banking digital currencies.
Having
All right, let
a
me-
CBDC that's like Bitcoin, or at least some sort of like.
Let Rob go.
like,
Rob is the
better
only
cryptography.
uncompromised person in this entire debate.
Who's the
Of
moderator?
course. I've yet to get my money. Let me say this. I don't mind the conversation, and we could keep going this road if everyone wants. But this seems to be more of a macro discussion of sort of economic systems. And I understand if your worldview is that system will eventually fail, that's what's responsible for this. But is there anything that we could steer to more of the specifics? For example, fiat currency exists. It has existed for, since 1912. What was unique?
You invited
in
an
causing-
ANCAP, like you know what I mean? Like this is on you, my guy. Of course, I was going to talk shit on central banking and fiat.
I understand that, but I'm
go
saying,
ahead. Okay, I'm just saying, like you invited me, dog.
Is there something specific that people think led to these particular collapses we're seeing now? I know Phenomics blamed sort of deregulation in the Trump administration previously. Paul, he's got one person he wants to blame.
That's cope to blame Trump. It's just cope.
No, okay. Hold
I
on.
agree.
So
It's
actually,
absolute
I wanna-
fact to blame Soros.
I do want to try to make this specific, but like I think what we're looking at the end of the day, like this is the thing that has been over and over and over and over again, is people basically they're playing musical chairs with other people's fucking money, and they're getting paid either way. That's what it is. So I do understand that Fabian Scott, excuse me, is extrapolating this out to like fiat in general and the lack of competitions between currencies and all that kind of stuff. But I think that there are things that are valid and strong enough about the concept of fiat currency that is valid about Keynesian economics, that is valid about central banking and all that kind of stuff, that allows us to do like amazing things with the amount of money that we're able to manipulate in order to do things. But then the problem is that we do have this like game of musical chairs, and with musical chairs so far, it does seem like it's private players who know that it's not their fucking money, and when the music stops, they'll have a fucking golden parachute to jump out on. And that seems to be if you look at the 1910s or the 1920s, or if you look at the 1980s or the 1970s, or if you look at the 1990s or the early thousands, that's the fucking game that these people are playing. And versus Scott saying deregulate it so the bumps are smaller because they only affect the participants. I'm saying make the Leviathan bigger so it scares the fuck out of these players to not be so fucking shitty.
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously I'll never agree to that. But if you want the boring answer, if you want the boring answer, right? Here's the boring answer.
We already know the
right?
boring answer.
So one of the boring answers we've already stated, right? Which is that they overinvested in long-term T-bills, right? And then the Fed massively increased interest rates because that's what fucking central planners do. They always over or undershoot because they can't solve the ECP, right? This is why it's always going to be less effective.
Where did you get this information from, out of curiosity?
Which one?
The point about they invested in too many long-term bonds. Did you get that from ChatGPT?
Yeah, sure. I got it.
Where did you get that?
This is common knowledge. This is common knowledge.
Yeah,
this is common knowledge. You can see it even in their.
It's not common knowledge. I'm curious where you got the information.
So even looking at their 2021, their 10K form, right?
Did you look at 10K prior to this?
Yes, I did. Right. That's how I know that their ratio wouldn't have changed if they'd have been moved to a Category 3 bank, right? So. And it's like something like 40, even in 2021, it was like 47 or 48 billion in T-bills, right? So the problem is that when the interest rate goes up, right, the T-bills become worth less money. And yet our banking regulations prior to Trump or any of this treats this as cash equivalent.
And if the interest rate goes up, the T-bills become worth less money.
The stress tests under the Dodd-Frank Act don't.
T-bills pay interest rates, correct? So why, if the interest rate goes up, would
let's say I
T-bills
buy
go
a
down?
T-bill. Let's say I buy a T-bill, right?
Oh, because it's a
interest is like 5.
Right. So let's speak non-nerd wizard shit and just speak in plain English.
Dude, you're in a debate about economics, right? Like I'll try and bring it down a little bit, but like you can't keep up.
If he's a layman, can I just do it real quick? It's because the money is worth less over time. When you have when the interest rates go up, if you have like stable 1 to 3% interest rates or whatever, that's viewed as like pretty normal inflation. So
by the way, they were buying T-bills at like 1.4%.
Right. So they were they bought a long-term investment strategy that basically said that the value of the dollar is going to be approximately stable or even be depreciative over the next like decade or two. And it's a long-term fiscal bet. But when you have inflation, and let's say that it's like 5%, 10% inflation or whatever, the value of everything basically, or the value of cash in reference to commodities drops significantly. So just to use this as an example, I have, $5,000 worth of credit card debt or whatever, and it's too much. It is too much debt, to be honest. But as a result of that, since eggs they were worth fucking $1, like a year ago or whatever, and now they're worth fucking $5, $6, whatever. As a result, my debt, even though the dollar number on the page has not changed, in reference to commodities, $5,000 worth of debt is technically less than it was a few years ago, because the correlative amount of money supply to commodities is different than it was. This is why
you did not make this more simple for PF Young for the
No,
record.
You just blamed it on
example,
inflation.
last
I thought we
example.
just blamed it on interest rates.
It is interest rates.
Which
Paul.
one
So
is
you know
it?
How,
is it inflation or is it interest rates?
It's interest rates.
those are
So you know how
correlated.
when you take out they are correlated, but that's not in this situation. and it's
Correlated
random
the
inflation.
positively?
Don't worry about it. It's not going to have anything to do with interest
This
rates.
sounds like Soros propaganda. No, it's fine.
Yeah,
It
okay.
is.
We'll tell you.
No. I'm gonna break it down for you in like.
Why am I not surprised?
Right.
This has
You
become
know-
3 people just
Holy
helping
shit! Can I
PF Young
finish?
get away
Can I
from
finish?
George
Phonomics
Soros.
finish,
Jesus.
please. Leave
Yeah,
Phonomics
let's-
inside.
okay.
Let's leave him finish.
Okay.
Let's let the
So-
least likely candidate of the Soros syndicate speak.
Okay. So
They have the
mortgages,
same
right? When you-
ideology. Fuck off.
Holy shit! Yeah, clearly George Soros is a socialist.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Phenomenal.
Paul. So when you take out a mortgage, right? You have a fixed interest rate. If you're not retarded.
An idiot.
Right,
Yeah,
let's say it's
you have a
6%.
fixed- Exactly. And then the interest rates of the market can go like up or down, and you can refinance if that's to your benefit.
Who decides
Uh,
what those interest rates go up or down?
Banker.
So the banks are going to decide based on the central bank interest rates. So if
one
you buy
small
like
group of people decides what this central interest rate is, correct?
13 people.
13 people, really?
Yeah.
It's not entirely accurate.
I almost made a TOS non-friendly joke,
Yeah,
but I held my tongue.
Thank you, Paul.
Involving
Please, again, we're trying to keep ourselves to have a channel, so please.
That's
I know
fair.
we're-
I'm trying to
people are
understand here. So
responsible
a
for 50%
small
of
Continue,
number
America's
of
Phenomenal.
people decide what the interest rate is. What do they decide the interest rate should be in any given moment?
So
And how
they're
do they
usually going to
prevent
be using either they're going to be looking at a few different things. They're going to be looking at inflation. They're going to be looking at unemployment. These are the two things that the Fed is like tasked to target, right? Is keeping inflation and unemployment, both of these, as low as possible. The ways that they're going to do that are they're going to be targeting NGDP. They're going to be targeting certain inflation metrics. They're going to be targeting real GDP, and they're going to be targeting the unemployment metrics. All of
What does
these are
that
gonna be,
mean,
like,
targeting that?
So like they can say like we're going to continue to increase interest rates up until NGDP numbers come out at this level and inflation numbers come out at this level.
Okay. This is wizard speak. I don't understand any of this.
It is wizard speak. They're looking at they're looking at the fact that the fractional reserve banking system, right?
I know what that is.
As it
they don't
stands,
have to
right.
hold as much money as
Well,
they say they have.
Right. The problem is that you're creating money, right? So you're creating inflation. And then there's a certain level of it that can be created. They're controlling the interest rate to determine, and they kind of sometimes do, sometimes don't control the fraction that needs to be. There's a lot of tools that the Fed uses, right?
That doesn't
But
change.
basically
that
what they're
often.
doing is that they're looking to try and control the inflation rate to land at somewhere between like 2 to 5%, right? Like they want to make sure it doesn't go over 5%, and they also want to make sure it doesn't go under 2%. They believe if it goes under 2%, that they have that there's growth that they could have allowed to occur that didn't occur. And if it goes over 5%, they're worried about the house of cards falling down.
What impacts the inflation rate? So you're saying they look at the inflation rate and then they decide, oh, the inflation rate is going up or down, and then they decide we're going to change the interest rate. So what affects the inflation rate if it's not these 13 people of a particular
Money
belief
supply
system?
and the availability
Dude,
of commodities.
it's-
Money
Although
supply.
there's multiple.
There's more to
What inflects the inflation
There's more
rate
to
is
it than
like
that, but
go
yeah.
get a master's degree in economics, right? Like there's a fuck ton of things that affect the inflation rate.
Yeah, well,
right? Like
Soros
we
would
could
love that,
literally
wouldn't
just
I?
talk
If I
about like
get
the
my
price of,
DEI diploma as well.
we could literally just talk about like the price of eggs, right? if you want, like, we could have a whole conversation about the price X. We could talk about highly pathogenic avian influenza. We could talk about government regulations. We can talk about grants that allow individuals to kill off all of their chickens because one was poisoned, because it's easier than going through all of the bureaucracy and government regulations. So it's easier to just take that money and kill all their chickens than to go through all that red tape. We could talk about the fact that corporations in the UK are refusing to raise prices and actually cost the customers because they're hoping to get imports from Italy, which is then killing farming in the UK. And that shows that the UK and those farmers are pulling out of the market. So as demand stays stable, the supply decreases there. Like, we could have a whole fucking conversation about
But bro, you could have just said supply and demand.
Right?
I know what that
So
is.
real.
Right, but there's all of these other mechanisms and levers and tools that they try and use.
But all those.
But I
levers
wanted
and
to
tools are
answer the
all gonna
boring
affect
question
supply and demand.
about what happened with
I need to
SVB.
get back to the boring topic.
Yes. All right. And so
Okay.
to actually answer the question, it's not just
All I
interest
know
rates
is
and the
I'm
T-bill.
very happy that SVB had 7 members of the 2SBT LGBTQS2I plus community from the stolen land in which I currently occupy. I feel like my conscience
By
is
the
clear.
way,
in
okay,
this
so
regard.
Paul's being a
No.
fucking asshole, but at the same time, this is kind of
Connor,
like a
may
conservative touchstone.
corn slit your glorious
Your throat. Yes,
in
corn
Minecraft.
cares not where the blood flows.
In Warhammer
you know.
40K only.
But
as you curse me.
Okay, but the point
in
being,
Minecraft
he's fucking
is no
memeing.
longer
I
a
would like to
defense.
finish a point. I would like to finish a point because you're very economic brain, so you love to talk for a while. Basically, like the point is that it is going to boil down to supply and demand. How many chickens do you have? How many people are trying to buy them at one time? How many people are trying to get access
That
to the
makes
eggs? How many
sense.
people are trying to get access to meat? And so
Right.
this is one form of inflation. There's different forms of inflation.
Mhm.
But if everybody has a dickload of money and there's a shortage of eggs and a shortage of chicken, the available or the prices of chicken and eggs is going to go up because everybody's competing for that resource. Whereas if there's a shitload of chicken and eggs, but there's not enough money to compete over those resources, or there's not as much interest, then you're basically going to see the price go down. Now extrapolate that out to everything. TV,
Okay, but why are you
houses.
see?
Well,
To
that's
me,
how a free market would
me and my
without central
dumb
planners.
non-propaganda saturated from Soros brain can't
Yes.
understand how. Okay, I get the eggs analogy, but let's move this out to something like, I don't know, a phone or a car.
Yeah.
You say, oh well, the price of phones or cars have changed. It's like, well, a phone 10 years ago was not the same thing. A phone now has infinitely more utility than a phone 10 years ago. So why are we
why
pricing
people are
these
willing
indexes?
to pay $1,000 instead of fucking $200?
Yeah, but how do you measure inflation when the supposed index that you have is changing?
So what
that's
you're
where
A
you
talking
become
about-
phone
masters
now
in
versus a
economics.
phone 10 years ago is not the same thing.
That's
so,
where you
so
become
this
a
is
master's
why
in
this
economics.
is why
This is
you
why there's
use
so
a
many
basket
different
of
measures
market
of
goods,
inflation.
right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of different ways to look at this, right? So when you're looking at a basket of market goods, you're correct. Certain things in that certain things over time are going to be, we're going to have labor saving devices because that's what capitalism gives us, right?
Right.
Or at least
ChatGPT.
capitalistic
Wait, what
economy,
is-
right?
Why do you think capitalism, as opposed to any other system, gives you labor-saving devices?
Because socialists are fucking centrally planned and they are economically inefficient and they do dumb shit.
Because they're
with their fucking money.
incentivized to do
The
so.
only
Socialism
person
doesn't.
dumber than a socialist is a libertarian.
So real,
All right.
so real.
All right,
Well,
I'm gonna.
okay.
We can continue this. We will, but I wanted to give a shout out here. So I know that even amongst those of us that feel that we're economically literate, we could all admit that there are people that are experts greater than us. And we actually have a call in from the hit CNBC show Mad Money. Jim Cramer is actually on the line right now, and he wanted to say a few words. So, Mr. Cramer, go ahead. I just want to say I'm bullish on this market. Bam! Buy it. Yeah, buy it. Silicon Valley Bank, buy it. Yeah, digital currency, global digital. Yeah, buy it. Oh, yeah, we're bullish. We're bullish on everything, just like Bear Stearns. Yeah. Whatever you do, don't go to the embarrassed Kramer stock ticker. Don't do that. Yeah, boom, buy it. Anyway, send in those super chats to really improve your portfolio. Oh, thank you.
That's good
Jim-
investment
Jim-
advice.
So I actually
And
want
then-
to answer this question.
Scott, do you understand that? Like, I got to promote here. Give me a second, then you can jump back in.
Oh, sorry.
So, yes, I agree, Jim Cramer.
My bad.
You can increase your portfolio by getting your super chats in to ask the audience questions. Also, don't forget, we've had a ton of people. I want to just give a shout out real quick. Petra, Sick Parvis, thank you so much. Someone gifted like 10 memberships, which I think they were part of. So thank you to whoever that was. Preset Native, thank you for becoming a sub. Raymond Cannon, thank you so much for the gifted subs. And Tyson Gallagher and anyone else that became a sub. It's difficult for me to catch all of you, but we really appreciated the Crucible. There is new content coming out daily for people that are subscriber, I guess weekly that's coming out for people that are subscriber only. So we really appreciate that. Also get your super chats in. And yeah, I mean, Jim Cramer, has that guy ever missed on a stock? I mean, he was spot on about Bear Stearns. Right. And continues. Well, anyways, he's right about this. Get your super chats in to ask questions. So sorry, go ahead. Whoever wanted to take it, go for
Sorry,
it.
I'm libertarians are stupid, but you know, at the very least, I understand basic economics.
No, you're a libertarian.
You're not very good at explaining it.
I mean, if it's difficult to get through your brain, I don't know if that's more of an insult to me or to you.
That could be you.
Regardless,
probably you, because
regardless,
I
if you want to
like
actually look at all of the problems that are involved here, it is a boring answer. If you don't want to talk about fiat, you don't want to talk about central banking, you don't want to have a discussion about how this is a house of cards, you don't want to talk about Credit Suisse and the fact that many of the things that they were invested in that collapsed in 2021 that are leading up to now are problems inherent to the very system of fiat currency. You don't want to talk about any of that shit, right? You just want to talk about this specific instance. One of the big problems is that because most of the people that were invested in Silicon Valley Bank were not like regular depositors, right? It's important to understand that these are individuals mostly.
I'm listening.
Okay. Yes. Most of the people that were depositing. I apologize. You're correct. I use those two terms.
Is anyone here not in
the investors were the
government backstopping?
Oh my,
the depositors.
I'm in favor of backstopping.
John, will you please? You have derailed this entire thing so that we haven't actually been able to.
I'm the only one keeping this on the real topic, but go ahead.
Yeah,
dude, if you want to talk about Jews, we can start talking about Jews, but I'm here to talk about money. I know they're correlated.
I wanted to have a debate, and we haven't talked about SVB like barely at all.
I officially, if the ADL is watching this, I disavow that comment from Counterpoints.
Okay.
According to Hans Hermann Hoppe, it's the smear and defamation.
So
go ahead.
So anyways,
Mr. Soros.
What I was trying to say is I was actually trying to answer the question. All of you just want to meme. When you have most of your depositors being in the tech industry, right? And you understand that the tech industry was doing great because of the lockdowns, right? And also because of low interest rates, that when you have low interest rates, you can invest in like 15, 20, 30 different tech startups, right? And then you can kind of just be like, well, it doesn't fucking matter. Like one of these is probably going to boom and I'll make my money back. But when the interest rates go way up and when the tech industry is no longer in that boom because everybody's like, really selling into tech is starting to pull their money out. They're starting to pull their money out. And then once you start to see that they have this liquidity issue, right? What ends up happening is a lot of these people are a lot more savvy than other depositors. They're certainly more savvy than like the average Joe that puts their money in a credit union. And so once they start to see that there's problems, they all pull out their fucking money. And so it's a boring answer, but it is part of why, if you want to understand why SVB collapsed, is that there was more knowledge in their issues, in their depositors than you would have at some of the other banks that are larger banks that are invested in, that are more diverse in their depositors, as well as credit unions and things like that.
Okay, Scott, but how is this?
Wait, no, then it should have collapsed in September when it was solvent. This is like ridiculous.
Yeah,
you keep claiming like
no, it's not
there was
ridiculous.
no way to know.
Yeah,
there was
I agree.
The stress testing could have done anything. It's very, very clear that if we had proper stress tests in place, we would have known that we could have solved these issues way in advance.
Okay,
again,
but hold on. You said this is inherent in fiat. How is this inherent in fiat?
What do you mean by this?
You were basically saying that all of the problems that we're having with SVB or whatever, like I can't quote you exactly, but this was before.
Like bank collapses as opposed to like full reserve currency or commodity currency, right?
I thought you said that you didn't like full reserve.
I said that I don't like full reserve when it is when we have a monopoly on the currency and that currency can't compete with other currencies. Like I like full reserve, but I also like fractional reserve, which is going to piss off all the libertarians because they fucking hate me when I say that. But like I don't mind so long as there's a competition of currencies.
All right, let me see if I can do this, right? How many people think, I know we're having this conversation of T-bills and things like that. How many people think that the Fed, by raising rates, could have contributed to sort of the run that caused SVB to collapse?
It's what they needed to do.
Well,
Why
what
did
they
they
should have
need to
done
do
is they
it?
should have
Obviously,
done
it
it much
contributed.
slower and much earlier. If they'd done it much slower and much earlier, we wouldn't have had the inflation problems. We wouldn't have had the SVB collapse. We wouldn't have had any of the risks associated with the issue. What we need is an algorithm in place in the Federal Reserve.
Okay,
yeah, but the
so
problem
if
is
they did it,
that's not necessarily true, right?
Well,
Because
An
go
algorithm.
ahead,
the
real
flip
quick.
side to that coin, let's say it wouldn't have caused SVB to collapse, right? The problem is that when banks collapse, right, money moves, assuming that the Fed doesn't create fucking bank term funding program and basically engage in buying fucking unsecured, giving out unsecured loans, right? Which they're not supposed to fucking do, but whatever, fuck it. We have a fascistic economy anyways. But let's just assume
Says
that
the ANCAP.
that I get that you know nothing about libertarianism and you think it's just a meme and I'm running circles around you while you guys all fucking jerk each other off about
shit. Oh,
Soros
fuck.
jokes.
I'm getting
But
I'm
circles
the
around.
only
I
one
asked an
jerking
earnest
myself off. I
question.
promise you that.
what I'm trying to say is, like, let's say that does happen. Let's say that would have prevented
Hand
the
check.
SVB collapse, right? What we also need to recognize is that when a bank collapses, smart money, right, like dumb money, gets destroyed, but it doesn't actually get destroyed. It moves to smart money, right? So like the more risky investments that are being done by banking institutions, those collapse, and then that money is moved elsewhere. It's only when the state steps in and says we'll cover those losses, right, that you stop the economy from being more efficient, and you stop banks from engaging in too much risk and instead engaging in better practices. So like, yes, you may have stopped SVB specifically from collapsing, but you also may have like not had an opportunity to clean out, which was a bank that was stupid, where people shouldn't have their money.
Okay, let me ask this. Since we agreed
right.
that Fed raising the rate was partially responsible, I'll just say something and we'll see if you can agree and we'll see if we can move this on somewhere. They did that because of inflation, right? Because of fears on inflation. That's why they decided. So what are we blaming for?
I mean,
inflation?
maybe,
Because
like, who fucking knows what
wouldn't
Jerome
that
Powell
then be?
thinks?
What would we
You mean
blame
who
that
are we
caused
blaming for
inflation?
Let him
inflation?
finish.
Let me
He's a
finish.
fucking
Let me
mod.
finish real quick, right? What are we blaming for inflation? Because wouldn't we all agree then, if that interest or if the raising the rates led to this and they did it because of inflation, then whatever caused inflation is at some point responsible for what happened at SVB?
Yes.
Well, no,
Okay.
the
So I
Fed
want
is
to take this.
responsible for not addressing inflation.
Okay, all you fucking geniuses, okay? As far as I can understand from people who are a little
That
bit
sounds
smarter
like
than me, but
sarcasm.
not that much fucking smarter than me, the basically what causes inflation, or one of the major causes of inflation, is increase in monetary supply without a correlated amount of increase in economic activity. And we had both during COVID. So we basically had we had the central banks or whatever printing out cash, handing it to everybody, stimulus, all that kind of bullshit. And then we had a whole bunch of people who were previously active in the economy who were no longer active. And all of the ANCAPs, libertarians, capitalists, all that kind of stuff, they were all saying, this is going to be dog shit for us. And then what happened was basically the people who were like, well, we need the stimulus now, et cetera, et cetera. I think that it was Wile E. Coyote running out on a fucking cliff and then eventually looking down. So what happened was we basically just started looking down at the economic catastrophe that was COVID. Now, here's the thing. You have to balance two things here. The inflationary people.
Stop saying the C word.
Yeah. Pandemic.
The fucking
Lockdown.
the Zulu flu, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
So, anyways, the Kung Fu flu. So the Kung Fu flu, the
Sun
problem
Tzu
with
flu.
it, Sun Tzu flu. True. I'm sorry for not.
Yeah,
spelling
there
it
we go.
properly.
Credit to
All
Scott
right,
for that.
so the racist flu. So you have this correlated thing where basically what's going to happen is, do you allow poor people to work more, catch the Sun Tzu flu before and then basically if they live, they live, and if they die, they die. You let all the rich people hide up in their castles until the catastrophe is past, but then we have a better economy? Or do you say, hey, everybody shelter up for a little bit, we'll pay you a few dollary dues in order to stay home, and then we'll shake this out on the back end? And we're answering that question now.
Okay,
False
let me.
dichotomy.
We
You
have
could
a,
have just
there's
not
an
locked
issue
people
here.
down.
Can we get
But
Andrew?
no, there's an issue here. Okay.
Phenomics, I promise you'll be the next one in, but Andrew jumped in. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I would assume everyone on the Crucible knows Andrew, but Andrew, founder of the Crucible, jumped in. Do you want to give like a minute on what you think is to blame for SVB, or just a statement to yell at anyone you want to yell at here, and then we'll jump
And
in
who
just-
funds you? Ask him who funds them.
He knows.
Yeah, I think we all know who funds me, right? I think we all know who fund. No, I'm kidding. All right, so
Yeah.
let me walk you through this. This kind of my take. I think the socialists and the ANCAPs will agree with me because I'm just right. So first and foremost, all banks are destined to fail. They're destined to, because they loan out money that they don't have, and over a period of time, the more money and resources that they end up with, the more they're going to extend credit, and they're always one bad gamble away from going under. Always. They're always one bad gamble away from going under. It's just that through insurance and all kinds of private equity and public equity, we don't let them, and we need to let them. So to answer your question, though, Paul, what's responsible for inflation and deflation? Think of the Federal Reserve as having two levers, and the Fed chairman, let's say Greenspan used to do this all the time. If you push lever one, it increases the money supply, and that increases inflation. If you hit lever two, that decreases the money supply and leads to deflation. And the goal is to have enough money out in the supply to be able to do massive amounts of loaning to people without devaluing the currency. That's their whole goal. So what ends up happening, unfortunately, though, is that sometimes they push on one lever way too hard, and they end up devaluing the money that way. Does that make sense to you?
That makes sense. Why did it take an external guest to come in and explain something that simple? The levers
We
are
said
printing
that all-
money. Hey, if I hear you correctly, the levers are printing money and increasing the interest rates. Is that correct?
Correct.
Well, it's just increasing the money supply or decreasing it. Yeah, that's it.
There's a
How
ton
does
of stuff
one-
they can do.
Through
Like they
interest
used to do
rates or
quantitative easing, right? And they could also do quantitative tightening.
Yeah. So
But
I mean,
also,
but
I wanna
everything
correct
is
one thing.
everything is
I
really
wanna
just
correct-
based around these two ideas of increase or decrease money supply.
I
If you
wanna
increase
correct-
interest rates, then less money is going to get loaned, so you are decreasing the money supply. You understand what I'm saying?
Andrew,
That makes sense. The interest
the
rates
record-
are more. It's not free money.
Okay.
For the record, when
I-
you said all banks are destined to fail, you then described fractional reserve banking, but there is full reserve banking, right? There is a banking.
Well, I'm
concept
talking
where you
about
pay
going back
someone.
to the very beginning. The reason in the first banks, even the first banks which existed, began to fail is because they figured out that they have way more money or way less money in their depository than people are ever going to come in and take out, right? So then they started loaning it out. This is the way
Right.
banks operate.
They started
That's
fractional reserve
called
banking.
fractional reserve banking.
No, it's not. Fractional reserve
Yes,
banking.
it is.
No, it's not. Fractional
those
reserve
words mean.
banking operates within a 1/10 rule. So they can loan out.
No,
and
that's
up to
a 1/10
Whatever
fractional reserve
fraction.
banking. You can do an
Fraction.
80% fractional reserve
hang on,
banking. You can
dude.
do a
80%.
50% fractional reserve banking.
All right.
How many different spells
mean,
were just cast?
You're
right
wrong, but okay.
No, we're
All right,
not
let's-
wrong, dude. Like
You are wrong.
when
You
the
think fractional
socialist and the ANCAP are agreeing, you're probably fucking wrong.
I'm not wrong. I'm
What,
correct.
why do you think fractional reserve banking only refers to one specific fraction?
So what I'm saying to you is that you can do loan outs on deposits without it being a fractional reserve. That's my point.
Sure.
Yes, if you
But-
have more money than you have deposit. So what you do
Yeah.
in a full reserve banking, right, is let's say you have $1,000, right, and you want to go to the bank. What you do is you go to the bank and you say, "Hey, I'm going to pay you $1,050 to hold my money for 6 months," right? And then you have to pay extra money in order to get your money back. So if you pull your money out before 6 months, you only get like 950. Right. But you get the ability to write checks. You get the ability to like use a debit card, et cetera, et cetera. If you have like multiple bank accounts with them and things like that. But you have to give them a deposit. Right. And they hold that money, and that money actually stays in the bank. It doesn't go anywhere else. But they charge you money in order to have access to those features, so you don't have to bury your money in a box in your backyard.
Hang on.
And then,
I
like,
gotta
go buy
hop
these
out
debit
and then I'll
cards.
hop back in.
Okay.
I gotta hop out. I'll hop back in.
Let me ask this question, right? Because like to see if we can take this somewhere.
They usually
One of the
hold like
questions-
108%, by the way.
One of the questions that people asked after the collapse was whether or not that the depositors should have received their money back. Does anyone have anything to say on that? Is there this question of a moral hazard by bailing out the depositors? Or do you think that we needed to bail out the depositors to stop a potential contagion event and a run on banks?
No,
The
you need to
fail-
bail out the
the
depositors, not the bank
Yes,
itself.
yes, and. Yes,
No.
and. Right there is a moral
Horrible.
hazard there.
I'm
but,
here.
Micah.
Holy
Hello,
snap.
Micah.
One
It's-
second,
because
Micah.
You're
Leave
only,
Economics
you're only an
finish.
hour and 15 minutes late.
So,
Listen, I
so
thought,
we
I
do
thought it was
need
the
to have
correct time.
we do need to have this moral hazard for the depositors, right? But we can't let that moral hazard cause a recession. So the moral hazard needs to be much greater regulation on banking, much tighter Federal Reserve legislation, and the FDIC having new insurance rules that makes it so that for depositors like this, they have to actually pay to get the deposits insured.
Okay,
You-
so we're
you've
going to leave
created a
Micah
huge
give his
problem.
opening statement on this. I just want to remind everyone in the chat, throw tomato cans as hard as you can for him being an hour and 15 minutes late. But go ahead, Micah, just kind of give us your opening thought, like about a minute, on who you think's responsible for the SVB collapse.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, I thought it was CDT. The only correct time zone. Anyway, when it comes to
Fuck you.
SVB,
Nation's capital and the stock exchange is
well,
here.
well,
Fuck off.
when it comes
Eastern.
to SVB, I think the primary culprit is clearly both a regulatory policy that is not applying equally to these middle-sized banks, which we have deemed, at least the federal government has deemed, to be of severe contagion risk. And most importantly, central bank policy, which has hiked interest rates significantly, which caused their bonds to decline in value substantially, so much so that they could not actually cover the servicing of their deposits.
Okay, so we were talking about the depositors. I think Counterpoints or Scott, you had something you wanted to say about sort of whether or not we should have made the depositors whole.
Yeah. So my thing is,
so-
Go ahead,
here's the problem
Counterpoint.
with
Let's
the
leave
depositors.
Counterpoints go first. Go ahead.
Yeah. So
Okay, well,
the depositors, if they were acting in good faith, if they didn't stay in there expecting a bailout, they just like left their money with the incorrect institution that mismanaged their funds or whatever, that's not any kind of fucking fault of their own. And on top of that, you're talking about wealth basically evaporating through their fingers because of some fucking dickhead who mismanaged shit. So I would say you take a fucking axe to that goddamn bank, seize all their fucking assets, and make sure that the depositors get paid first. And then what I would say too, this is our mistake in 2008, is since if you fuck up this goddamn big, you basically get maybe not nationalized, but you get fucking put on training wheels, like financial fucking training wheels, where you have to have like an 80% fucking reserve or some shit. You're not allowed to participate in CDOs and reverse swaps and all these risky investment structures and all that kind of bullshit, because you've very clearly shown that you can't handle to sit at the fucking big boy table. And then I would look at the big boy table and say, if y'all fuck up like this, we're going to fuck up your entire industry. We're going to go back to basics. So like, I think that, for me, people were mentioning FDR. I'm a bigger fan of Teddy. Like I like Teddy. I like the fucking leaving the market to do what it does best. But if somebody fucks up, then you need to take a fucking axe to their fucking institution. And I am perfectly okay with the state doing that.
Good,
This
Scott.
is the problem with, look, I have no problem. I mean, I have some problem, obviously, because I'm an anarchist, but like the FDIC taking it over, seizing their assets, selling off everything that they have so that depositors get most of their money back. But the problem with the Fed stepping in and being like, oh, well, we can cover everything, is that this is now a precedent every other time this happens. Because anytime a bank collapses, and they don't say that they're going to cover the depositors, well, they'll be like, what about SVB? What corruption there? Like who bought you off with that situation, et cetera. So at this point, we have to essentially assume that the Fed is giving out unsecured loans, and that the Fed is covering every deposit in the economy, period. Because if they like
If it's toxic and big
we
enough.
can say it's only this time, but the practical reality is that if they do it now and they don't do it later, they're going to hit like massive political costs. Like they're going to enrage people, and they're not going to enrage like everyday Americans that have no fucking power, right? They're going to enrage super fucking wealthy venture capitalists, right? Like, so at this point, like stepping in that way, like, no, I think we should have seized our assets. We should have sold things off. I don't think I'd be interested to see if the Biden administration actually had a whitelist and stopped SVB from being purchased because their own personal friends and their own like banking systems. I don't know if that's true. That's the rumor mill. If that is true, like that adds a whole nother level of corruption to this. But I mean, if there was someone that was willing to purchase, like, then they should have been allowed to purchase SVB. But yeah,
we agree on one part, but I think we disagree on another one. So what I heard from you is there's too much carrot and not enough stick, and we're setting a shitty precedent. Yeah, I do agree that there needs to be a massive fucking stick. Now, my stick isn't you cannibalize the industry and then the depositors get 50% of their deposits back or 75% and they just fuck off and find a new financial institution. My stick is basically a shot across the bow to the entire industry.
I would add fraud charges to the CEO that was selling off 3.6 million in shares in February that obviously knew this was going to fucking happen. And I mean, it's such a dirty industry. Right, like Joseph Gentile was selling shares and he was the CFO of fucking Lehman Brothers when they collapsed, right? Like it's a nepotist based fucking system of a bunch of people. And like, the problem is I hate agreeing with the socialists and like the ANCOMs and like the left-wing anarchists, but like it's not that the government fucking owns the banks own the government. Right?
Well,
like,
okay, but this is why we need a Teddy who isn't scared of the CIA or heart attack.
Fuck
guns.
both
That's
of the
why
Roosevelts.
we need them.
Andrew,
I'll shut up and let other people talk.
Did you have, so they were talking about the depositors, but I know you were having some trouble with your tech issues. Did you have anything you
Yeah, I
wanted to
still
add?
am. Is the camera okay on your guys' end, or does it look frozen?
It's lagging.
It's frozen.
It's
Super
Yeah,
lag.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what the fuck is going on, but for some
It's
reason,
the big banks.
The CIA.
yeah. I guess there must be some background application or something. I might have to reboot. Whatever. What was the question?
Oh, I just didn't know if you had more that you wanted to add. I know you were describing inflation, but if you had more that you wanted to add because you were having tech issues.
No, I was just saying
you're gonna
that
have to
you
go
don't
back to it.
you don't actually have to have fraction. Yeah, I was just saying you don't have to have fractional reserve banking to do loans from a bank. It's not necessary. Fractional reserve banking to lose the fact that there's some type of methodology to it.
Any Christian
Yeah.
nationalist.
I do want to
basically
point
every
out that
single
there is some hypocrisy here, as Andrew and Micah are both engaging in fractional reserve debating. So,
Oh, I get it. So in general, then, like if we got to the point where we could admit that inflation was the reason that the Fed gave for raising the rates, like, and so if we blame the Fed for that, was the Fed correct to raise the rates, and what do we blame for that inflation that occurred? Go ahead, Mike.
Okay, great. So the Fed acted way too late. It's because they're using the wrong target. They're using an inflation
Bitch, we already
target.
said that. You'd know that if you'd been here.
Yeah, wait, who said that?
I did.
Oh, well, yeah,
I
well,
did.
okay. Well, that's
I
great.
brought that
well,
up.
I'm going to say it again because
yeah.
I'm gonna say,
You're all
I thought you
lying.
meant
Why are
who,
you lying?
I thought he meant like who interrupted him.
Oh,
Yes, Phenomics was
amazing.
the
I'm
first
gonna
person
talk now. Yeah, so they're using the wrong target. They should be targeting GDP. So they messed up a lot. They should have offset the stimulative effect of fiscal policy. They should have been less expansionary. And if that occurred, well, then interest rates wouldn't have had to be hiked so much. Whenever you hike interest rates this much, I mean, you're like 50 basis point, / 100 basis point hike after hike after hike. It's impossible for banks to fully hedge against this. Especially
what is your background? Excuse me, Micah. Where are you getting this information from? Who are you? What is your
I
background?
study economics. I write a newsletter in economics.
What do you have
Nice
a
to
degree
meet
in
you, Paul.
economics? What is your background? I'm just curious because apparently everyone is an economist except me. So I'm just curious as to
I study economics at the University of Houston.
Okay. What does that mean? Are you getting a degree in economics?
I am getting a degree in economics, and then
okay.
I'm
what year are
be
you?
Putting applications for a PhD program after that. So
are you
I'm in here for the
master's?
long haul, huh?
Are you in a master's? Where are you in your degree?
So usually for people that want to do PhD track, they go from undergrad. So I'm in undergrad right now.
Okay.
doing internships, and then we're going to go to PhD, inshallah, hopefully. But yeah,
Okay.
it's
All right.
nice
Well,
to
I'm
meet you.
curious because if you just came in just reading this off ChatGPT, I would have been more suspicious. But you clearly have some background here.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank
Some
you.
Soros
I
background.
don't
there.
understand how asking questions on someone's credibility is somehow controversial.
We're doing fine.
Okay,
Okay. I'm not
that's-
offended.
It's fine.
I wouldn't care if you were,
Anyways,
Micah.
Micah, you could proceed.
Really? Why? What's up?
With what
Yeah,
you were
so
saying.
I think if they were using a nominal GDP target, we wouldn't have had such steep hikes, which that would have obviously helped a lot. Now, the other issue is, like we were mentioning earlier, there's a lot of moral hazard in the system. Obviously, the solution to that is not just, taking all the banking system down right now. There's too much risk of contagion. It's too late. We just need to change federal insurance, FDIC insurance policy in the future, so we don't recreate these types of crises, as Fen has probably previously stated in the past.
Why don't we up the FDIC insured threshold to something like 25 million instead of 250,000?
They basically did.
So I think we should lift the cap, but lower the actuarial value for the actual amount they cover. So instead of having it at 100% up to 250,000, I think it should be something like 70%. People need to actually try to think about the risk of these banks. Now, the good thing is, the biggest clients are big companies that actually have the time to do this. Me and you can use rating agencies just like with everything else. We know
hold
that.
on, wait, that's smart. So what you're saying, because right now the FDIC insured limit is 250,000. So if I deposit in my bank $500,000, I'm guaranteed to get at least $250,000 of that back because that's the cap. But you're saying we should up the cap but lower the percentage. So if I have maybe $500,000 in it, I only get 70% of that back.
Sure.
Because then I have some skin in the game and what's actually protected.
So
Exactly.
can I interject just for 1 second?
Yeah,
Hold
sure.
on, is that
So-
correct? Is what
Yeah.
you just said?
That's
Okay.
correct.
That's what he's proposing. Yeah.
Okay.
ahead.
And
Okay.
obviously that comes
That
with
seems
higher
reasonable
premiums
to
for
me.
higher
This
rates.
is unrelated to the debate. So my wife is saying my son is super sick. She needs some help in the other room or whatever. I'll see if I can come back. But basically, I'm gonna shut down my camera. I got roughly 70 people on my side cross platform, so I'm gonna leave them here to enjoy you guys. So if you guys could shout the N-word or talk about Soros a little bit more, that would be great.
carry
If
the
I can come
baton.
back, I'll come back. Worst case scenario, you got an extra 70 viewers. So love you, appreciate you. Seems like you guys
Yeah,
got some competent
take care,
people in the
Connor.
room. So
Yeah,
Thanks,
Inshallah,
man.
you
I'll see y'all in a
Obviously, no
second.
problem. Yep, obviously. So, let's.
I like Micah's solution. Let's go with Micah's solution. That
Yeah,
seems great because it
let's go.
requires the depositor to have some skin in the game.
Yeah, so I think if we lower the actuarial value for deposits under 250,000, and still have that full breadth of exposure, so companies are safe. We're not just completely screwing over businesses. And then as Phenomics was saying, we should have risk-adjusted premiums for banks. If banks are being more risky with their deposits, they should pay higher premiums, just like any other form of insurance. So if we do these things, then we can we could really reduce the risk.
Pay higher
of
premiums
future crises.
in what?
What was that?
Like
For the
the money that they
depositors?
pay to the FDIC, the money that the bank and the depositors pay to the FDIC in order to keep their depositors insured.
Okay, I know I'm not part of this debate, but I've heard the counter argument to what you're saying, Micah, in this current system. The fact that we did, this isn't a critique on what you're suggesting,
Sure.
but on what actually happened, the sort of bailing out of these depositors. One of the arguments I've heard is that the moral hazard that's incurred through the system of the banks is banks will still be encouraged to invest riskily because they could then look at depositors and say, well, you'll get a better rate of return here because of our risky decisions, but there's no downside to you because if our risky decisions don't pan out and we go belly up, don't worry, the federal government will bail you all out as depositors. Do you
Well,
see
that's why
that
it's
as
only-
a potential moral
Like
hazard?
I've already addressed this.
Yeah, that's why they're only going to have limited insurance coverage. So I'm not one of those people arguing for 100% coverage. I'm arguing for like 70%. So you can still lose 30% of your deposit, and that's not even
It's
factoring in
huge.
the fact that you're going to have to
So-
wait like 6 months to get your money back from the FDIC.
So basically, the issue here, right, is that we recognize that the moral hazard exists, right? We recognize that banking is unique in the like if you put in an analogy like restaurants, right? Let's say a restaurant in your neighborhood takes out a couple of grandmas because of food poisoning, right? There's not a run on the restaurant industry, right? Like
way to phrase
people
it.
don't stop going to restaurants in general because they don't try and like pull out money. They don't stop going out to eat just because one restaurant was proven to be bad, right? But otherwise sound in banks can collapse when one bank collapses due to contagion, because they're all it's all a house of cards, because they're all engaged in fractional reserve banking. None of them have the money on hand to give all of their depositors their money back, right? And so the idea is like, well, we can make a slightly less risky thing, and it's a compromise, right? In recognizing that there will be some risk, so it won't have quite the same moral hazard. But what you're still recognizing is that it is still a problem, because the very issue here is that you're shoring up and insuring things via the taxpayer.
Wait,
The
taxpayer doesn't pay shit.
Hold on.
But are you a Rothbardian, like full reserve banking fan or something?
I'm an ANCAP, yes.
No, there's the majority of ANCAPs, when it comes to like actual economists, believe in free banking because that is the natural state of banking.
Scott.
You told me to get fucked, but if he was here, he would have already heard that argument from me. You're the one that's fucking late. Like, catch up. Don't ask questions.
Well, I'm going to ask you the question, and we can walk through this.
Dude, there's not a zero. There's zero taxpayer dollars in the FDIC that pays for all of this. The FDIC has not a single dollar from taxpayers.
Really, the salaries of the people administering that are not paid by tax dollars.
Where they get their money is from the from the money paid in insurance premiums.
Right. Yeah, so what happens when banks, right? What happens when banks now have to put more money into that pool? If we're talking about raising the insurance
into the insurance pool, they have more money.
So there's going to probably be a split incidence, right? Are you saying like 100% of the incidence is like on bank users? Like that seems kind of weird.
Okay, so what's gonna happen? Do you think banks are just gonna sit down and be less profitable and be okay with it?
This is not how prices work.
No?
You're an ANCAP. You should know the incidence is split in this instance.
So are you going to answer the question, or are you just going to go, that's not how it works?
Well, I mean, it's obvious. Like, why would you assume that the incidence of the insurance that any company has to buy is 100% on consumers? I mean, it's like obviously ridiculous.
Yeah. Are you dumb as fuck?
That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I said.
You're
I asked
saying,
a simple question, and then you answered with why would you assume? I simply said, what happens when they have to pay more money, right? Like, what happens when they have to put more money?
Answer the question, Mike.
So yes, probably they're going to have slightly lower interest rates, maybe slightly higher fees, but also the profits are going to be a bit lower.
So the banks are going to have lower profits, and they're going to pass some of that on to the consumer.
They're going to pass some of it on.
Yeah, what's wrong with that?
Okay, so then they're going to pass some of it on to the consumer, right? And then they're going to have less profit. Now, do you think that the banking industry and all of these guys are not going to engage in riskier investments, right? Now that they have more insurance backing them up, and that their profits have been decreased?
It's common sense.
The same problem exists with private insurance. Do you want to just ban private insurance too?
Like my plan.
I like how you guys are trying to run away and just give me more questions, but you're not.
No, I'm answering your question. The exact same problem exists with private insurance. The problem is within you're saying that insurance is bad for the economy. I don't believe believe that insurance is bad for the economy.
Scott, I don't think you're understanding that these are risk-adjusted premiums, which means they have a direct financial interest in not being more risky. And my proposal wouldn't actually be increasing the actuarial value; it'd just be changing the policy. So their premiums wouldn't even have to be increased that much because we're actually reducing coverage under $250,000.
I mean, you can do guesswork about like how much their insurance premiums would have to go up. You recognize that there will be some force that pushes it up, and you recognize that that force will also pass partly on to the consumers and pass partly on to the bank's own profit. You recognize that those people have an incentive to gain profit, and that they have more insurance that is state mandated.
No, there's
I don't
not
understand
more.
why you're pretending like this is like some crazy talk, and you're just like running away from these things. And going,
I'm not
like,
running.
But
I'm right here.
Difference. It's okay. You think private
life
insurance is bad? Nobody
for
said
the common
that.
man. Nobody understands any of this economic.
No, I didn't.
Why don't we get to the fundamental issue here, the elephant in the room, which is there appears to be, in a narco-libertarian perspective, a government should not exist and fiat currency is bad, versus the central banking perspective. So why don't we have that conversation?
Didn't say fiat currency is always bad. It's got a monopoly on fiat currency.
Isn't everything that you're saying conditioned by your beliefs that fiat currency is bad?
Dog, literally everything that everybody says here is going to be conditioned upon the axioms that they have for
Right.
their
So
own
let's get into
political
that far
philosophy.
more interesting discussion than this economic wizard speak that nobody can keep up with.
So we can talk about.
So
we can talk
hold
about
on.
reserve banking.
What is
I'm
Scott
sorry.
in your in Ancapistan paradise? What is your solution? You said you wanted competing currencies. You want no central bank. What describe for me?
I did
What
already.
it is. In what world does all of these problems not exist by having competing? Explain that to me. I'm genuinely curious what it means to have competing currencies and all that.
So when you're talking about like a market downturn, right? Like there's no world where that doesn't exist. Be it socialist, be it capitalist,
Supply
be it anything
shocks.
else.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
But when you have a free market where currencies can compete, right? Then the one that does the best, is the most stable, holds its value the longest, is the one that the individuals that control that currency are the ones that profit the most. So they're incentivized to make it better and better and better, and the ones that do poorly fail. That's not what we have when we have a bunch of dudes pulling fucking levers and making mistakes and being like, oh well,
I
it's still
agree.
world
In
reserve
my
currency.
opinion,
Fuck
it seems very odd that we have a small number of people who are clearly flawed making decisions about what the interest rates should be, how much money should be in the system.
No, PF.
How can that possibly be calculated?
Here's the question, really, that you should answer. Why should the government, the federal government, have a monopoly over centralized currency in the United States if there's a currency that people prefer to use over the dollar?
There's a lot of reasons.
Because
none of your people's name is PF Young.
Thank you.
Okay.
Contracts, when someone signs a financial contract between two businesses, the government is the adjudicator of that contract. And so when there's a dollar that says this dollar is legal tender for all recognized debts, the government is saying, we've created a currency that by our own standard is legal tender for adjudicating contracts. If I create a contract that says I owe you $1 million for a service and I give you $1 million US, then we can agree that that contract is settled. So the person adjudicating the contracts between individuals needs to be the one issuing the currency and determining what currency constitutes a valid completion of that contract.
The U.S. government doesn't adjudicate contracts between individuals. They might adjudicate contracts between themselves and other nations. But what if companies want to trade amongst themselves and they don't want to use a federal currency? They want to use their own currency that maybe, like, let's say 15 major companies have created on their own, and that's
they
what
do
they
that all the
trade
time.
in.
They do that all the time. In the form of credit. If I'm a company, if I'm a manufacturer of something, and I have a supplier, and the supplier says, "Hey, we can give you, twice the raw materials that we normally give you, but you have to store it. We'll give you a credit in the form of some X number of materials that would use." That already happens. There's all kinds of non-government interfered anarchic transactions occurring in the market. But when it comes to settling contracts in a court of law, which is ultimately the infrastructure that surrounds all these relationships, it needs to be adjudicated by a single body.
And so, well, hang on,
single body has
because
to
this is incorrect. So I want to know, what currency do you think that they use, Phenomics? What's the currency you think that these companies use? Since you opened your big fat mouth, tell me what the currency is called.
The U.S. dollar. I said nobody's
okay. Well, they are stopping them. You're not allowed to have a competing currency with the U.S. dollar.
You're
not. You go to prison. You go to prison forever when people have made competing currencies, which they've tried to do. They go to fucking jail.
Can you show me the law?
Yes, it's 100% illegal to make an alternative currency to the U.S. dollar inside the United States that people can use as legal tender. Yes, okay. Totally illegal.
I don't know what you mean by legal tender, but can you send me that law? The only
Andrew,
way that
you're
we keep a monopoly on
that was just a Mont
currency
Bailey. I mean, there's obviously legal currencies that are not the U.S. dollar inside of the United States, but you can say, okay, well, you can't use it for this specific legal purpose. I mean, obviously, but there's tons of stable coins, cryptocurrencies that people use. Banks use them. Chase has its own cryptocurrency.
Pay taxes.
Micah just accused you of a Mott and Bailey, Andrew. I'd like to hear how you respond to
that. So, what was the Mott and Bailey?
Well, yeah, you said, okay, you can't make a competing legal currency in the United States.
That's correct. Am I wrong? Or is that not?
You said later.
Am I wrong, or is that illegal?
You are wrong.
Okay, so it's not illegal. I can make an alternative currency inside the United States.
There's
the US
tons of
dollar?
currencies.
Let's make Crucible coin.
Okay.
that
Andrew,
have
I'll
been
go in on you with
created
that. $10,000 US.
in the United
Absolutely.
States.
What do you think Bitcoin is?
Bitcoin's a digital faith-backed
It's
currency.
the solution to
It's-
all of
it's
these
a
dumb
currency.
fucking arguments.
No,
Yeah.
it's only
it's a currency
hang
in the
on. It's
US.
only a currency because we've determined it's a currency. Understand this.
Oh,
That's
but,
just
under,
currency.
but understand that also there are lawmakers trying to regulate it out under this
But
provision.
you said
and
you
now,
can't
hang
make
on,
it.
you can't make an
Not-
alternative currency.
Not
I'm
un-
going to
if
show
they're
you.
trying to
I'm
regulate it
gonna
out, they're
show
creating a
you
new provision.
the
They're not
law.
doing it
I'm
under the
going to
old
show
provision.
you the law right now, so that you guys can see for yourself that it's illegal to do. People have tried it, right? And you go to fucking jail for doing it.
You
so
just
know.
Micah, your
acknowledge that
credibility as an economist is on the line right now. I just want everyone to be aware of the stakes are.
He never called himself an economist. He said he studies economics and that he's in undergrad and that he's hoping soon
Okay.
to be a PhD candidate.
Yeah.
I study philosophy. Does that make me a philosopher?
Yes.
Wait,
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
all right. Well, hey.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
people
it's-
get really,
All
people
of
get,
you
I just,
are
I said
dumb
people get really,
except me. So says.
And by the way,
people,
here's your
people
here's
get
your
really
hang on.
defensive
By the
about
way,
people
by the way,
calling
here's your
themselves
answer.
economists.
please.
Here's your
One at a
answer as to
time.
why that is. Here's your answer as to why that is, because you guys just lied. Bruh, cryptocurrency is not a currency. It's considered an asset. If it was considered a currency, you would go to fucking prison. It's
People
not a
use
currency.
cryptocurrency
Again,
to
Micah, how do you
Can you
respond to
show me
these
the law?
charges?
Can
Micah
Andrew,
is now
you just-
posing
you
as an
moved- You said you were going to
economist.
show
Let's
me the
leave
law. You
economics
didn't
I'm
answer
show
going
me
to
the
show you
law.
the law. I'm going to show you the law, but I just wanted to check that out myself.
Cryptocurrency is used
only
for
thing that you're
transactions.
gonna-
It's used as a
Yeah,
store
so
of value. It's
the
It's
only-
it's
currency.
considered by the United States government to be an asset. It's
So they
not
consider
considered to be a
currencies
currency.
assets. I mean, who cares? I mean,
Oh,
Well, I
that's a
care. I care because the core of my argument is that you can't make alternative currency inside the United States. You go to prison. That's how that
that's
works.
not going to hold up in a
You
court of
see-
law, Micah. You can't just say "who cares" to the judge when he says,
Yeah,
why
who
is it
cares?
second
so
currency?
true.
Who cares that it's not
Andrew,
considered
Andrew,
a currency,
the
which is what I
only
hinged
law-
my argument on. Who
Andrew, the
cares?
only law that you're going to even begin to be able to point to is a law that makes it illegal to make metal coins. That's
No,
not
it's-
the same as a currency.
It's illegal to make an alternative currency, and I'm pulling it up. Right? You guys can go about and do your little thing. I'll pull up the laws so that you see for yourself. People gone to prison for this for years and years. This used to be really big to try to do, by the way, through the 60s and the 80s when there was a bunch of people who wanted to have like their own countries, and they were really pushing, especially after Ruby Ridge and these places for, like Free State Wyoming and shit like this, to make their own currencies. But you can't. But you can't. Because you go to jail.
Honestly, Andrew
So
seems the
states
most
can't make their own
confident in all of
currencies.
this, so I'm going to agree with him on this issue.
Paul, this is unfortunate. I'm gonna have to be more confident, but I don't even really care. Can we actually talk about whether having competing currencies is like and like full reserve banking, which is a
I
pretty insane
agree. This is
position?
a more interesting conversation. It seems to me like if you have competing currencies,
No, I have to fucking interrupt. Like, people keep saying that I only want full reserve banking, and I have said on this panel multiple times that like I have no issue with fractional reserve banking unless it is a monopoly controlled by the state. If you
Well,
want
I
to
mean,
have a
you can't just
competing
raise points
currency,
against fractional reserve banking and then like wield it against the government, in the current system. And
yes,
then actually
yes, I
support it.
literally can.
Then you, but if you're making arguments that are valid against any form of fractional reserve banking, but you actually support, you're totally fine with a form of fractional reserve banking, I'm going to be like, well, you're not making very much sense.
Yeah, welcome,
It's not a very
welcome,
relevant.
welcome
criticism.
to libertarianism 101.
Yeah, it doesn't make
which
very
is
much
that
sense.
I
I'm well
wouldn't,
aware.
I wouldn't invest my money there. I don't think it's as stable as full reserve banking, but nevertheless, I would still say that you have the right to do that, to have that voluntary
We're not
contract.
talking about
I don't want
deontology. We're
to
talking
ban.
about what systems work, right? So if you're going to say like, okay, fractional reserve banking in the current system with a central bank, whatever, brings with it tons of systemic risks. It's bad, but it's also totally going to exist in Kapistan where your system doesn't have much of a benefit. It doesn't matter about rights. None of that. We don't care. We don't care about your deontology. We're not anarcho-capitalists, except for maybe Andrew. We don't care. Nobody else cares.
Hell yeah, Micah.
Right.
Invade.
So
let's
you're just
invade
saying-
in
you're just saying
Kapistan.
You're
We
not
need
allowed
to
to
make
make
Kapistan.
arguments.
The only
No, you're
person who's
saying you're
expressed a
not
problem
allowed
with
to
federal
make-
reserve banking is Andrew, and Andrew has also denied vehemently that it's fractional reserve banking.
Okay, honestly,
No,
hold
that's
on,
not-
real quick.
that's
real
not
quick,
true.
real
No,
quick.
you're
Hang
just
on,
saying
no,
I can't
shut up.
make arguments.
Hang on,
and
stop,
like,
stop,
and then
stop.
fucking
What's my
completely
claim?
dismissing
What was
what
my
I
claim,
said and
Phenomenal?
lying about what I'm saying.
You said that all banks are doomed to fail because they're doing, and then you described fractional reserve banking, and then you denied vehemently that.
No,
it was
that's not what I
fractional reserve
said.
banking.
And let me go ahead and restate what I said because you're a lying
Okay.
sack of human dog shit and always have been, by the way.
How did I get caught in the middle?
What
of
I
these two?
what I said specifically was
Can I
that
get
all
moved?
banks are doomed to fail, and it is true that I did describe fractional reserve banking. I just made a simple qualifier, which is that as long as you have a bank which exists, you're always going to have people handing out deposits in excess or loans in excess to their deposits, which requires no fractional reserve banking. That's it. Both of those claims at the same time are 100%
So
true.
wait, what did I lie about?
Both of those claims are true. So what's funny about it?
I want to
Wait,
know
wait,
what
wait.
I lied about.
What's funny about it? You
Oh
were
my God,
laughing
I'm
like I
getting-
said
you-
something
I'm getting
silly.
bounced
What
in
did I
between
say
you.
that was
Ding,
silly?
ding, ding,
Because you
ding.
called me a liar and
You
then
are a
said,
liar.
Tell me what
You're
I
a
Let me
lied
ask you a
fucking
question
liar.
here. Hold
You
on.
said
Let's
that hang
establish
on.
some
Your claim
credibility.
was that I said fractional reserve banking itself, right, is the problem, but it's not.
You
Fractional
did
reserve banking
originally-
itself. That's not just the
Originally, you
Describe
problem.
described
fractional reserve banking.
Why don't
banking.
we hold on? Everyone on this panel, why don't we figure out who actually knows what they're talking about by just asking some basic questions? How many people here have started their own business? Okay, so whoa, okay, because I was going to
I mean,
say I'm going to defer to
technically-
Andrew on this. Yeah, I'm sure if you register with the government. you're
Yeah, I
socialist.
mean, technically,
Micah. Whoa, hold on. I knew Andrew started his business. What business you got going?
So me and some friends started an earring company, and I also have a basketball training business. Yay! Living the anarcho-capitalist dream. Honestly. It's
Okay,
great.
well, to be honest, Andrew, I was going to just defer to the person who's got business experience, but now you've got competition. So I can't tell who's more credible here, Micah or Andrew. Clearly, Scott is.
Well, I don't know
a
what me
Soros
and
shill.
Micah are even in
Phenomics, same
contention
boat.
with yet, right? I don't even know. So I jumped into
so I
this
do
thing in
actually
the
have
middle of it.
I have a question for you, Andrew, because some of you said it made me a little bit confused. You said, so in any fractional reserve system, you're going to have loans in excess of deposits. I'm not sure if that's necessarily true. I think many times they completely balance
No,
each
just
other
in
out.
any banking system since the
Ye-
beginning of
Well,
time.
so I think
Since the beginning of time, when they figure out that they have deposits, their deposits are just sitting there not doing anything, they tend to end up loaning those deposits out.
So this is
which is
intermediary.
fractional
theory.
reserve banking.
So this
No,
is
fractional
intermediary theory.
reserve banking is an indication of some type of fixed percentile.
Let's
with the
ban the
fraction.
word
Wait,
fractional.
You don't
reserve
even need the
banking from here on
fraction.
out.
You
Wait,
can have
wait,
a
so-
zero
Solve brain
fraction
cells.
reserve banking and still give out loans, Scott.
So-
And
so-
It's called the no
So-
reserve banking. That's not
so-
called fractional reserve
well, then
banking.
that's what I just said.
Andrew,
Phenomics.
That's not
let me
fractional
finish.
reserve banking.
I just said it wasn't phenomics. Listen, pay attention to what's being said.
I think we
So-
covered
so-
something.
You're
So,
just
Andrew, I
dumb.
didn't
You're
finish-
functionally stupid, and this is a problem you have, not me.
So I didn't finish my question. I think I understand the confusion. So like you're using intermediary theory, which is
man.
like the theory that I guess like most people have for banking, but that's not really how banking works.
It's intermediary theory. Listen, Wizards of
He's
Waverly
about to
Place,
explain
you have
it.
to define
Just let
these
him
terms
finish.
Yeah,
that
so-
us laymen don't know.
So the
Finish your
intermediary
thought.
theory story is basically you have like a bunch of real currency, and that currency goes into banks, and the banks lend out most of it, and they keep a little bit on hand in the form of reserves to pay out to people whenever they need their money.
That's fractional reserve banking.
Because that's intermediary theories of how fractional reserve banking works. That's actually not how it works. There's been some fascinating studies that have been done on this, and most of the field that actually studies this has shifted their opinion to what we call credit creation theory, which is essentially that really the amount of initial money that the bank has is very small. These are reserves. This is a separate kind of currency. These exist within the central banking system. And banks, private banks, create the massive majority of money. It's over 90% in the form of credit. So they're actually creating money whenever they give out loans. And that loans is offset by new deposits in the system. If you guys aren't like, oh, this probably sounds like another language to you, but this really changes actually what
So
our
wait a
analysis
second.
of how
Wait,
fractional reserve
okay,
banking
so hang
works.
on, back up for me then, Micah, because what you're saying is still, even in this system that you point to, which you called it, what, intermediary theory? Is that what
So
you said?
this is credit creation theory. This is credit
Okay, so even inside of this particular theory that you just postulated, am I correct in assuming that you still have deposits in excess of loans?
So deposits and loans are the same, but reserves, that's the real currency. So deposits are like fictitious. They're not real. It's bank money that's been created. So there's way more credit being extended than reserves, but that's a different thing than deposits.
Okay, so there's an excess in reserves then, so that they can make these loans.
Yeah, so there's like they have like 3% of the money.
So
that they've
assume that
extended in reserve.
assume that the excess was not digital but was physical. If the excess was physical via physical deposits, or then we would be talking about the exact same thing, just pre-digital, right?
Well, so
What?
So even pre-digitally, like banks still had ledgers, so they still created
That's
money.
right. They even use things like tally sticks as a ledger, right?
Yeah. So they,
Yeah. So you
they
still,
were
so you still
creating
have the
money.
exact, so you still have the exact same system.
No, it's different.
No, it's the same. It's the exact same system. You're just pointing to credit and saying these are no longer physical excesses; they're digital, but it's still excess. And so they point to the excess in order to justify giving out the loans. This is how they justify giving out the loans, right?
So if we go back 200 years to like 1845,
Oh
right?
my God, let's not go back to 1855.
We don't have central bank reserves, right? But we have cash. So we go to a bank, we give them cash, and they realize that they don't need to use, like, with that cash, they can actually create a bunch of fake money because they can service all of those deposits and credits with that smaller amount of money.
Correct.
So they put that in the ledger. So really, in their ledger, they have like $10,000 worth of credit and $10,000 worth of deposits. They're both equal, but they only have a certain amount of actual money, which is
so the only distinction between that system and the one that you're indicating right now is the digital portion of it. That you're now creating a digital portion, and that's the excess rather than the physical portion.
Well, in both of these cases, credit creation theory is different than intermediary theory. It's a different thing.
But that just answer my question then.
Well, so I'm just pointing out that this is a different system that's true in all of these instances. Has nothing to do with the digitalness or anything.
Can I ask a question to Micah?
Yeah.
How would it? It seems to hinge on it, Micah. I don't know what you're talking about.
Why does it hinge on it? In what way does it?
What,
hinge?
let me
because
try
I don't even know what this
here.
conversation
Rob,
is.
because
Like,
he
why are
claims
we
to-
just
Please.
why are
Paul,
we
let
just
me-
explaining
Scott,
econ
please.
to PF Young
Listen.
and Andrew? Like,
Listen,
I
let me
feel like
stop.
left out,
Please,
because
Scott.
this is so
I
stupid.
think, all right. So I think what's happening is this, right? Andrew's criticizing this system. He's making a criticism and showing a problem in it. And Micah's saying, but the technical term you're using, things like fractional reserve and intermediary theory, those technical terms are wrong. And actually, we have this new theory called credit theory. But Micah, you're saying that would also be a name for the type of banking that was occurring in 1840, right?
Yeah.
So this is just a semantic argument. Andrew's going to say, whatever the fuck you call it, I don't care. That's what I'm criticizing.
Correct.
Well, so the
It's
difference
same system is my point. It's the same
Well,
system, just lacking digital currency instead of whatever paper credit you decide to come up with. It's all the same shit. It's made out of thin air.
So I mean, the difference is whenever, if you believe in credit creation theory, which I believe is mostly consensus opinion these days, the supply of money is actually determined by private banks and is changing all of the time.
So
Whenever they create credit,
that's how it is right now.
or
They
credit
still
is
do that.
deleted. So with intermediary theory, there's a fixed supply of money that's completely determined by the government. That is just 100% determined. The money supply does not change whenever a bank makes a loan. Under credit creation theory, it does.
So, okay, let me ask you a question. Right this second.
This
Let's
is
say
why it's inherently inflationary.
Well, you're right, it is. But if you wanted to create a whole shitload of money that you could then loan out to people, and the Fed then had to print a boatload of money, do you think that would increase or decrease inflation? Just curious.
So a bank, I'm a bank.
Just an inflation on the dollar, period.
So
if billions and billions of new dollars were created in order to create new lines of credit, do you think that that's going to increase or decrease inflation?
Yeah, I mean, billions of dollars of new lines of credit being created would increase inflation.
It's going to increase inflation, right? So then all of this is always going back to the exact same thing I'm talking about with monetary levers, which is that if you push to increase money supplies, you're going to increase inflation. And if you pull the lever back to decrease the money supply, you're likely going to decrease inflation. It's always the same thing when it's rooted down. No matter how many different theories you come up with, it's always going to be the same exact thing every single time.
It's relative.
It's not
to the
relative.
level-
Can someone
Yes, it
explain
is.
to
Yes,
me-
it is. It's relative to the amount of activity in the economy, right? If it were the case that there were billions and billions of dollars of economic activity that were possible to stimulate, increasing the money supply that much by putting loans into those areas would absolutely not cause inflation or it would cause minimal inflation.
It would cause less deflation, right? Because in that instance, like, it's going to be inflationary, but maybe we're going to have deflation.
Yeah,
so
it's going to
not a
inflate
problem.
no matter what. There's nothing you can do about that. Just
But you-
just giving out those loans for a while, you're going to sit with no returns. You're going to have inflation no matter what, dude.
So there's supply and demand, right? So
Yeah, that's
sometimes
correct.
whenever the economy is in a really, really bad spot, there's just tons of supply that's not utilized. And so by increasing demand, you're just going to increase supply, and there's not going to be a huge change in the price level over the long run. it's like a good thing to do. It's like stimulative.
Can I ask Micah a question?
Sure.
Because he's an economist.
Oh my God.
What is the difference between a credit card and a debit card?
That's amazing. So, I mean, a credit card is a line of credit. So whenever you spend the money, you're spending the bank's money. And they usually charge far higher transaction fees or vendor fees, so you can get some cool rewards in the United States. You can't do that in Europe.
It's a
Debit
way
card
for
is-
you to personally inflate the value of your dollars. Is what. A
Okay,
credit
that
card is.
see, why couldn't you just say that, Micah? Look, I
First-
appreciate that you are getting an education in America's universities, but Andrew has been a clear explainer of everything so far on this panel. And I suggest that you reevaluate the quality of your education if you're going to come on publicly and try to explain something as complex as fractional reserve banking
I'm
to a
sorry.
bunch of laymen's, especially if they're Orthodox Christians, because, we know something's wrong with those people, right?
I'm trying my best, Paul. I'll try to improve.
Am I supposed to?
so
Am I supposed
let
to
me-
hop on the
let me
Christian
say
chat
this.
thing again?
What we're gonna do here is we're gonna start taking calls. Obviously, the debate could still go on, but what I want to do is give everyone an opportunity to sort of give their final thoughts from the debate as it stands right now. You could comment on something that people have said, or you could talk about the topic as broad as whole as who you blame for the SVB collapse. So we're gonna go as best we can because we have new members and things like that in reverse order. So Scott, you have like a minute to 2 minutes to kind of give your final thoughts, and then we'll get to the audience portion.
Sure. Yeah, this turned into such a shit show. So who do I think is responsible for the SVB collapse? Well, there's the boring answer that I brought up earlier, which is that, they bought long-term T-bills and they were hoping the Fed would blink, and the Fed didn't blink. They had a lot of individuals that were invested, that were savvy, that understood what was going on, that had 90% of their investments were over 250K. So once sharks smelled blood in the water, they pulled their money out, and this caused that collapse. Further ahead of that, right, beyond just that, I think that the entire currency system we have is a house of cards. I think we're hundreds of trillions of dollars in debt as a nation when you combine, all of the debt that we have, as opposed to just like the national debt, and then you had student loan debt, and you add all of the debt that's leveraged that people are doing through banking, and then you talk about Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. I mean, the CBO said before the Sun Tzu flu, right, that by 2050 we should be roughly $121 trillion in debt. We have so much stuff that we have to pay. Our dollar is supposed to be strong, but it's not. And I think this is one example of many that's showing just how weak the dollar is. I think we all need to be paying attention to Credit Suisse. That's the real thing here. If Credit Suisse gets enough financing from Qatar and Saudi Arabia, and maybe some additional funds from Swiss central bank, and they can stay up, then things will probably balance out. If Credit Suisse goes down, we're looking at a completely different economy for at least a few months or a few years. I think it's morally wrong and ethically unjustifiable. The bank term funding program, I think, was a terrible idea. If the administration kept SVB from being purchased, I think that's a serious issue that needs to be investigated as to why they kept that from being purchased and who those purchasers were. But of course, this is mostly rumor mill, so we'll have to wait and see if we ever do find out that information. In the Fed, it's stupid, it's bad, and they'll never be able to solve the economic calculation problem.
Okay, thanks so much, Micah. You have about 2 minutes. Go ahead, give your final thoughts.
Amazing. I'm just going to spend this entire time responding to Scott. So he said we're hundreds of trillions of dollars in debt. That doesn't matter. Private debt is not a problem. It's one of the most essential features of any sort of capitalist economy. It's going to exist in your libertarian fantasy land, so it's not a problem. We can talk about public debt. Public debt has been growing. It's been growing probably at a rate that higher than I would like. But interest payments as a percentage of GDP are not at an all-time high throughout U.S. history. It's not like a ridiculously high number where we can never possibly ever, sustain our economy this way. We can obviously fix that. Now, the worst thing we possibly could ever do is switch to your private currency utopia, because that would just require us to default on that debt, destroying the entire financial system. So if you're talking about Credit Suisse and how bad that would be, oh my God, you haven't seen a Great Depression yet. With all that aside, when it comes to SVB, I think bailing them out, if there was a real contagion risk, was okay. I think if there was a buyout that was coming, we definitely should have not stopped that. I think that'd be totally unacceptable use of government in that situation. But bailing them out was fine, but we need to change our policies to lower the moral hazard in the system and make sure the Federal Reserve is not taking on policies that can create massive risk in the financial system, which is currently so greatly exposed to big interest rate hikes.
Okay. Thank you so much. Andrew, go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, it might take a little bit longer, but I entered the panel late. So let me just tell you a couple things. For one thing, I don't think me and Scott would have too much disagreement on economics. One of the things libertarians I enjoy about them is they tend to at least understand some of the symptoms of these problems. As to economics in general, I consider it to be a pseudo-scientific pursuit, just like psychology. It is a soft science for a reason. None of them ever get anything right. They've never gotten anything historically right, ever, and they're never going to going forward, ever. You can see already that our transgender coping friend is already becoming hysterical because the soft sciences and progressives go hand in hand because they have to continuously make projections on futures that they're always fucking wrong about. They're always wrong about everything, and then they fucking pretend like we're supposed to follow them like the Pied Piper off the ledge. So here's the truth. It's really simple. It's really easy. It's really basic. I like having really nice shit. Somewhere, somebody on planet Earth is going to get fucking exploited for that. And there's not a damn thing I can do about that. And I don't really give a shit. But as far as a moral quandary goes of capitalistic economics, if you have socialists come in, you're going to have a lot more people getting exploited somewhere than you do right now. No matter what, there's going to be some system of exploitation. Okay? There's nothing you can do about it. But one thing the libertarians get right on this is what we like to call usury. And usury is something that even the socialists should say is fucking problematic. And what we live right now in is a system that's based around usury. And I don't even know how we got on the ground floor of how economics works. That wasn't even the debate I was prepared for, but to come and talk about this specific bank collapse, which is just going to be one of many in a domino effect. And they do this sequentially. And I believe that it's a part of a controlled collapse. And this type of control collapse has happened before. And when these control collapse happen, what they do is robber barons come in and they end up getting billions upon billions of dollars in bailout cash to keep these banks moving. And they just become more consolidated under a few family names. That's what I think is happening and where we're going with this. And traditionally, I would be right because this happened about, 200 times. It sounded like 200 times. So that's my closing on that.
Okay. Paul, go ahead. You have about 2 minutes.
As usual with these discussions, this entire wizard speak about economic theory and all this nerd shit is a convenient cover for what I brought up at the beginning of this debate, which is the obvious and only cause of this collapse. And it is he who shall not be named. And I'm not going to name him. But I just like to point out once again, he wins because all of us got caught up in this nonsense when the real discussion needed to be had. So,
all right.
That's my closing statement, Rob.
Thank you so much, Paul. We won't say Voldemort's name. Go ahead, Phenomics. You got 2 minutes around there. Go ahead.
Sure, yeah, there's a few things to get through. I think Micah did a pretty good job addressing everything Scott said in the closing.
George Soros, by the way, is who I was talking about.
All right, Paul.
Oh, shit, really? I didn't get that. I didn't know who you were talking about. No. I think Micah did a pretty good job of addressing FL Scott's closing statement, so I want to go through like what we talked about during the meat of the debate. FL Scott seemed to
That's
deny...
not what a closing statement is for. Dude.
All right, please leave him finish. He didn't interrupt you. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So the meat of the debate, right? Like I want to talk about like why we how we talked about there. I brought up that it was the Dodd-Frank bill, right? That we had good regulation that could have prevented this at the very, very beginning of the conversation. Scott says no, that's not the case because they had their ratios in order. I brought up that we knew back in September that they were solvent, and that the stress tests that they had in place for these $50 billion and up banks before the rollback in 2017 would have easily noticed that they were solvent back in September, and then Scott just said no and moved on. I think that that sums up that part pretty well, and you can see where that goes wrong. The Fed, again, already very, very addressed. We need much stronger Federal Reserve systems that aren't just the Federal Reserve people at top doing things at a whim. We need a system, an algorithm in place that allows us to see that there's high demand spikes and address it before inflation becomes a problem, and then have those spikes not rise at such a level where we have these big financial crash risks with the current spike in interest rates with the SVB. Obviously, SVB mismanagement was a problem. To really quickly address what Andrew said, I think that economists have been right about a lot of things throughout the years, and that economists were pretty right throughout this whole time about predicting how inflation is going to happen. Back when they said that inflation was going to be bigger now that we have a demand spiral, and when they said inflation was going to happen due to the supply shocks in Ukraine, and that there were solutions for that, and we implemented some of those solutions, and to some extent, inflation has gone down. We didn't implement others, and inflation hasn't gone down enough. I think that covers most of the bases. Other than I think that there's plenty of room still to talk. That I wanted to talk to Scott about the ECP and about the falling rate of profit. I don't think that either of those were very well addressed. That how you're going to address the falling rate of profit without having to some extent more government pressure towards investment, government getting involved to increase investment. And I don't know what the economic calculation problem is if it's not about central planning of the entire economy. I've never read a single libertarian criticize or theorist say that the ECP is about having a Federal Reserve. Other than that, I think I'm done.
Okay. So I had some questions, but I'm going to forego that because we actually have a lot of callers. I'm assuming that's going to mock us all, but that's okay. That's one of their right to do so as callers. So we're going to jump right in to the callers in the order they came. But I just, right before we do it, want to give a special shout out again to everyone that's subscribed. So thank you to whoever gave the original donations, to Petro, to Sick Harvest, to Preset Native, to Raymond Cannon for the gifted subs, to D'Artagnan, and then we'll get to a more that I highlighted here later. But we at Crucible appreciate there is new subscriber content that's coming out every week, so we always appreciate those subs. So still got time to get your super chats in. We got a lot of callers to get to, so let's bring them in. First, we're going to have Falsers. Go ahead, Falsers. What was your question or comment?
Sure. So I really have a series of comments to make. Otherwise, my mic okay before I go on a rant here?
A little booming, but you're all right. Yeah.
Booming here.
You're good.
Just move them away a little bit. Sorry about that, guys. So I was disappointed in the panel, guys. We really didn't answer the damn question from the beginning, which is why did SVB fail? And you can throw your hands up all you want, Paul, but you were one of the people that kept zooming out on this. And what people do when they don't understand the mechanics and the specifics of something is they zoom out into these vague platitudes, and they have discussions about things like philosophy, right? And so that wasn't the question. Amen. So I'm going to just very, very, very quickly answer the damn question that still somehow hasn't been answered. Phenomics kind of touched on it. He started to put the cake in the oven, but never baked the damn thing and put any icing on it. So let's run through it very quickly, just for everybody that had questions about it. Dodd-Frank law, super relevant. Glad you brought that up. It was passed in the Obama era, and it did some really specific things. Particularly, there was something called the Volcker Rule that stopped speculative investments and created criteria and regulation into the financial risk that banks could take with their investments that are, let's be clear for anybody that doesn't know in chat, financed through their clients' deposits and funds, right? So a little basic economics there. The other piece of the Dodd-Frank law that's super, super important is there were health checks put in for these banks, wherein they could go and mitigate risk if they diagnose a problem proactively. Those all went away in 2018 with a bill during the Trump administration for the Economic Growth, Regulatory Relief, and Consumer Protection Act. And there were three very specific issues with that. One is the type of investments SVB was allowed to make, and we heard it talked about a little bit, mortgage-backed securities, right? The second is the method in which they could now approach their own liquidity. So now they can react to these things in some really, really deregulated ways. I mean, they just have a lot of authority to treat their own liquidity however they want, regardless of their clients' financial health and futures. And all those regular stress tests, they disappear. They completely disappeared. And lo and behold, SVP qualified for the asset limits in that bill that allowed them to come out of that regulatory pool. And so alongside that, you have something else happening, which is inflation. And the question earlier that came up, I believe, from Paul was, what is it, interest rates or inflation? Well, it's absolutely both, because interest rates have a direct relationship with inflation. And so what happens is if you own a fucking ton of mortgage-backed securities and you raise all the interest rates and they were bought at a lower interest rate as a reaction to the inflation, all of a sudden, all your investments are just fundamentally worth less overnight. And that's what happened to SVP. And what's really disappointing about this panel is every single ideology had a good argument to make and you all fucking missed. The left had a great argument to make for deregulation that happened in the Trump era. The right had a great argument to make for how the Fed did not properly manage their own interest rates and how they raised them, which directly, in a lot of ways,
Okay, well, caller,
Who's paying you to say
I'm
that?
almost done. Give me
Wait.
15 more seconds and I'll be done.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear it. And then anybody in here that's been spouting fucking conspiracy theories for the past hour could have had a great conversation.
Who's funding you?
Peter
Who's
Thiel
funding you?
Pulling out tons and tons of money before the collapse happened, and then going and saying, "Hey, maybe you guys should take your money out," after he's already done it. When, how does he know about the collapse? There's a lot of good questions there on every side, and so many failures to answer.
Okay, so
On top of that, really quickly, Silicon Valley Bank lobbied specifically for that 2018 Dodd-Frank rollback. They were in front of Congress and testified.
I have a
for it.
question for the caller.
No.
So okay,
I
that was-
addressed literally everything that you said throughout this debate. Were you just not here?
Scott, you touched on them. You
Like-
certainly did. You certainly did. And then you converted it.
And then
into this
PF
dialogue
Young
about a
wanted to, like,
worldview, which didn't
go-
answer the question.
I mean, I talked about central bank policy and in the
rest of the
interest rate exposure of the bank. I don't really know what I was supposed to do other
right.
than that.
No
Andrew, go
one
ahead.
Show up
went
on time.
through the
All right.
timeline, guys.
So
You all
here's-
touched on a little bit of it,
All right.
but you
So
never
I
actually.
have
did
two
it.
questions. One, you should come back
Okay.
to the Crucible falsers for some economic debates. And then the second thing that I'll touch on is it's a Saturday night, and I just wanted to come on and drink and yell at leftists. I didn't even know what the fuck we were talking about. I just wanted to hop on and do
I mean,
that.
that's fair.
So
That's fair.
yeah,
man.
I feel like I adequately represented what I was here to do. So
This is the Jon Stewart defense. I'm a comedian. Hey.
All right,
no,
anyone-
it's not a comedian, right? But I mean, all I got the second I hopped on was this is how the economy works, and I'm like, well, I don't know. Some leftist is talking. Time to fucking smash their face in. That's all I know what to do, right?
All right. Falsers, do you have anything else? Or anyone have any comments to Falsers real quick before we get to our next caller?
Well, no, I want to talk about the fact that, their investments changing and the regulation, and I forget the exact term, Micah might know it, where you go to a category 3 bank and the Fed requires like this yearly, I can't remember the term for it. There's a specific
Stress
term for like
tests?
no, it's not just they were doing those internally and they had to do those already. There's like a very specific
Nowhere
type
near
of
as many.
stress test.
At
There's a very
SVB,
specific
the SVB didn't have to
I
do
can look
the
up the-
Dodd-Frank stress test. Yeah, go ahead.
there's a different one that would have kicked in at the 250 mark, and they were at 230 billion. It's like it's got a crazy name. I can't remember. I thought maybe you would remember it. I'd have to go back and look at the legislation on like
Yeah, the
what
Dodd-Frank
occurs when
one.
you have a category 3.
Falsers,
Yeah.
can I
That's not the name of it though. Regardless, I'll sidestep the name of it, an additional stress test. The problem that I have with that analysis is that would that have changed? Like we keep saying, there's this weird assumption that none of this would have happened. And like, I don't see any evidence that this wouldn't have happened if that had kicked in, because they had already addressed it to their investors several times in both in their forums and in discussions that they were well above any of those metrics. And most people, I think, falsely assumed that their heavy investment in T-bills was like just a safe bet. Right. And so I don't understand where this additional stress testing, like maybe would have caught it a couple months earlier. But if they were in that category, would the CEO, who was also the fucking chair on the
Hey,
board of
Scott,
fucking
can I say,
San Francisco Fed board,
I think you're asking
They
a
were-
he might have just
fantastic question.
committed fraud.
They were solvent
I
in
still think he
September.
committed some fraud.
Hey, you're asking a fantastic question, and I would have loved for the past hour to hear those questions talked about, and like the push pull between like what's the accountability for the deregulation versus the accountability of the Fed in general, right? I think there was a great conversation to be had there, but instead, somehow, Scott, you articulated your point in the first 15 minutes with like, hey, we should move to synthetic currency instead. Like the whole thing just zoomed way out.
No.
And hold on, one quick point of clarity. My entire criticism was just on the nature of how it was handled, not so much
this caller is
like,
dominating
what-
us. This is amazing.
No. Okay,
Yeah, who
cool,
is
Mike,
this
shut
guy?
up.
What are your credentials?
So
are you
anyways-
an economist too or something?
Oh my God,
Who are you to
shut
pass
up.
judgment?
Well,
All right,
Paul,
all right,
I'll tell
real
you,
quick.
I don't get upset when people explain high school economics with high school nuance and ask them to simplify it for me.
I'll
tell
never
you my
recover.
credentials
I'll never
fast.
recover. I'll never recover.
All right,
What
all
is
right.
your
Here's the deal.
background?
We got to get to our next caller. I'm sorry, we do have callers.
No
lined
worries.
up.
No
Jesus
worries.
Christ.
One
What-
last
Falsers,
please.
hop in the
What
Discord.
is his background? I'm just curious. He
Paul,
seems like a
we're
smart
done with
guy.
that. He can explain his background, but Falsers, you should definitely hop in the Discord and try to get into some debates in the future, maybe one-on-one or further panel debates. But I thought you contributed very well here. And definitely like hearing from your perspective. So
Hey,
I'm
I
still going to
appreciate it,
say.
guys. I
I'm still
appreciate
going to say
And for the record, I would like to drink with a lot of you guys, Andrew,
Hush,
so I feel the
hush.
beer
For
Go ahead,
the
Scott.
record,
10
the
seconds.
only reason I went into those things is because I was demanded of the other people here. Like I would have loved to have that conversation. I sat
right.
quiet for like 30 minutes because these idiots were going back and forth with like dumb fucking things that I had no desire to engage with.
Okay. All right.
Like
Thank you so
libertarianism.
much, Falsers. We really appreciate it. We'll get to our next caller. So
I don't know if you can trust a guy with wears beanie cap.
That guy was a
That's-
construct. I don't know who that was.
Oh, so now everyone's talking shit once he's gone. He was kicking everyone's ass. Now they're talking shit when he's
I
gone.
mean, I literally mentioned.
Well, yeah, that's
I mean,
how that
we
works.
do it.
That's how that works. What do you
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
That's what we're
I'm
supposed
going to talk
do.
shit on all of you after the panel.
Yeah, right. That's how this goes.
Amazing.
We're going
Amazing.
beanies.
All right, let's
We're going
bring on our
beanies.
next caller, a veteran of calling in here. One of my favorite calls. Richie, thank you so much for being here. Go ahead.
Hey,
with
what's
your
going on?
comments and questions.
All right, I'm going to do a quick physiognomy check, left to right, top to bottom. Phenomics, probably a twink vampire. Paul P.F. Young, you've got the Dawson's Creek physiognomy.
Centrist James Vanderbeek. I'll take it.
Andrew, base lumberjack. Michael Irfin, also another twink that is likely locked in the recesses of Fort Knox with a gun to your head from the Federal Reserve. And there is curiously an absence of gold. Scott Fabian Liberty Short. Rob Noor Vit.
I'm 6'5". What the fuck?
Not
And
mentally.
yet you come off like a hobbit. I wonder why.
You just have small energy.
Rob Noor Zangief from you know Zangief.
I know Zangief well, yeah. Thank you.
I feel like you did your research just to fuck with me on that. Like,
I didn't. You just look short. Sorry.
You have a hobbit hole in your background.
I mean,
What are
you
we
do
to
look the
expect?
smallest
that's
out of all
the
of us.
joke. That's the whole reason. It's
Okay.
Great joke, bro. It's great.
Thanks, Richie.
Publicly phasing.
Beards and
Okay.
Beardley's house behind you.
what was that? I missed it. What did he say?
Nothing. I'm saying
He was just smoking a cigarette.
Inside stuff. Okay. Andrew, thank you. You were asking about is usury. Like this is effectively the entire premise of this whole thing is usury. If usury didn't exist, we wouldn't be in this situation. So thank you for asking that. But for the ANCAPs, I have this question. You guys are big fans of the free trade argument. So the global domestic product, I'm certain you know, but it's consumption plus investment plus government spending plus net exports, right? So if we stopped trading with China, wouldn't that make our GDP go up dramatically since we are suffering a severe trade deficit with China?
So, like, the thing about like China's a weird one. I don't really know how to answer this question. And the reason I don't know how to answer this question is like I would be for fair trade, but then you have individuals that are cheating, and then you have individuals like you have manufacturing being shipped to China, and it's like, is that really the market, or is that cap and trade emissions in the UK that is like where they're trying to brag about how they've reduced carbon, but really they're offshoring manufacturing to places that won't do it. And then China is also weird because they don't really believe in intellectual property. Like they believe in it, but then they just steal it anyways. And like I'm an anti-IP guy, personally, and so like the question is like when you in like there's something that's great in theory, right? Isolated, like what is the moral decision to do? But then when you get into the like what should you do given all of the variables and circumstances, like I don't know where the moral answers, like which one is the most ethically justifiable, right? Like is it ethically justifiable to impose tariffs on China if China's face is essentially competing in a trade war that we're not engaged in, right? So like the answer is like magic crystal ball. I don't know. No one knows. We just have guesses about like what would happen in that.
Well, the right
scenario.
answer
Good
is
guesses.
that yes, it would increase our GDP. As
No,
how we
that's
currently
definitely not the right
calculate it.
answer. That's definitely not how that works. Just because we have a deficit with one country doesn't mean that we're losing out from this relationship. We're not. This is not like the 1700s or 1600s. We're not.
Also, how do
living
we
under
calculate it, Mika?
We're not living under mercantilist
Yeah,
economics.
Mika. You just got
Just
called
because we have a
girl's
deficit with
name.
one
How you gonna
country, we also have
respond?
surpluses with other countries. That money ends up coming back here. That's how
And
that works.
That deficit is in part because we're trading capital goods for like consumer goods, which means that we end up.
Okay. So
more
if we
in the long
actually
term.
eliminated the trade deficit with China, then our GDP wouldn't go up.
If
We
you
would
do it
just-
by
we would just
tariffs,
be
of
worse.
course not.
Yeah,
no,
implementing
literally
tariffs would
just
be negative.
eliminate it, delete it from our current balance sheet. Would our GDP?
That's
go
not
up?
how that
How?
works.
Like what do you? What do
Oh,
you
that's
want
not
to
how
do?
that works.
That's not how
Would
that
you
works.
just want to? Do you want to like
That's not how that works,
tell
though.
China like just like show up
Oh,
into China
well,
and be like, we're
telling me
not
it's not
trading
how
with you
that.
anymore?
Telling me it's not how that works. That's okay.
Well, I can
Private
explain to you,
companies do
Richie.
the
Richie,
trading,
you
you
can't
don't
just
No,
delete
you
all
can't
trade with
explain it
China.
because that's how that works.
Well, Richie, I can explain this to you if you want. You can't just delete all trade with China. Obviously, for tons of practical reasons, the supply chains are super important.
Obviously,
and so
it's not
that would-
obvious
that
to
would-
me.
that-
If I'm
that-
making the point, it's not obvious.
that would harm output in plenty of other areas because we're already relying on the supply chains. Also, that money, like the trade with one country, also affects the trade with other countries. You understand that, right?
Oh, right. Yeah. No. And so,
Well, Richie, if I could just a little bit, like, I just want to say nobody knows for sure what happens in the future when you make a policy decision. There's just really good guesses, right? Like, so anyone that claims like this is what would happen, like you can have a really good guess about what will occur in the future, but like you can never fully say that unless it's based in a form of praxeology. Like you can know for a fact that there will be a downward pressure, for example, on employment if you raise the minimum wage, right? Like that is a fact, but that doesn't necessarily
You don't
mean
know
that
that.
like that you don't know necessarily that unemployment rate will suffer because there can be a multitude of other economic factors that could
FL Scott.
occur in that.
all right. No.
FL
Okay.
Scott, are
all
you
right,
familiar with Munchausen's trilemma?
Like I've heard
What
it
spell did
before,
he
but,
just
like
cast?
I couldn't. Yeah, like it's been brought up to me before, and I've read about it before,
Okay.
and I can't remember. Can you refresh
The
my
idea-
memory?
He
the
said
idea basically
Manchowder's
goes-
dilemma. I
Yeah.
think it was Manchowder's dilemma.
Munchausen's.
My mom
next
said I was
twist.
special,
The idea-
and that's but apparently she has
learned that
Munchausen's
from
by
Hogwarts.
proxy.
The idea is that you can't know anything because everything has to be grounded in one.
Ah,
of three
yeah.
ways. Either by axioms, which you can't know axioms, right? You're just gonna have to assume some axioms by yeah, I think he calls it like
I remember now.
taking it on faith, basically. The other two are by circular grounding or by an infinite grounding. Both of these are obviously wrong and impossible because circular grounding, you can justify anything by circular grounding. And for infinite grounding, there's no way that you could actually hold like infinite beliefs to ground your beliefs in. So there's no way you can know anything, even whatever you're like.
The
crazy
axiom that I
praxeology
present, the
bullshit.
axiom that I presented is one that I don't think anybody here would necessarily disagree with, which is
But
that
you don't
human beings
know it.
are rational actors.
I do disagree with that. That's
Bullshit.
a
Wait,
Have you ever
hang
met
on, hang
any
on.
Human being?
Hang on, Phenomics. Do you know that?
Interesting.
No.
Do you know
I
that?
believe it. No, of course.
And you don't know that either, right?
Of course
Well,
not.
then shut up.
Rex.
Scott was the one who came out saying that you can know
Fuck
things,
nah,
right? And
you
the
got
reason he
fucking
said it
Rex,
is because
bro.
there's agreement, right?
All right, let's
Talking about
leave.
trade
Well, no,
deficits,
you
what
can
does our
you can
trade
know
deficit
things
with
because
Hungary look like?
humans act intentionally.
Anyone there may have an influence on the trade
With
deficit
Hungary? Did you say Hungary?
Yes.
Caller, did you have any other questions?
dude,
What's
I
our
had,
trade
like, a
deficit
million-
with Moldova?
I had like
Does
a
anyone in
million others,
Hungary,
but
in
these
particular, who may have
goofballs.
vested interests in this conversation? I'm just-
Okay, Mika. All right. I had so many for you. You said okay, so you said that these decisions were decided by the federal government, but you're certainly aware that the Federal Reserve is not controlled by the federal government, right? And don't give me some bullshit about, oh, well, actually, the Congress decides. No, it doesn't. The Federal Reserve has never been audited.
What?
It's a private institution,
decides
right?
the Federal Reserve.
No, I put culpability on the central bank.
Oh, but you said it was just these decisions are decided by the federal government. Were you being intentionally dishonest, or was it just like
The
sort of
the
a slip of the tongue?
deregulation was decided
Which
by the federal
decision?
government.
You were talking about printing dollars.
No. Well, the Treasury prints dollars, but when you're talking about marking up accounts, increasing the supply of reserves, lowering interest rates, that's the central bank for sure. That's the Federal Reserve.
Okay, so it's not the government that makes those.
Yeah, it's not. I don't think that's what I said, but yeah, I'm sorry if I said that. Yeah.
Okay, all right, fair enough. That's all I got.
Hang on, I got one thing for the caller though. You didn't mention at all that Mika's name is Mika, and so I'm very disappointed in you, and I feel like you shouldn't even call back in ever. That's how I feel about it. Just
I said Mika like 12 times.
Yeah, but you didn't say his name is Mika and purposely make a spectacle out of it, which is very disappointing to me, Richie. It's very disappointing.
Dude, I said he was being held like he was a twink being held at gunpoint by the Federal Reserve in the basement of Fort
well, I'm not
Knox
here
that
for
has
nuance.
no gold.
Okay, I'm not here for nuance.
All right. Well, thank you as always for calling in, Richie. We really appreciate it.
See you guys.
Yep, we'll see you. Let's see. You know, you guys don't make it easy to be a moderator. Just saying.
Rob, I'm just trying to get to the truth, and all of these people are in the way.
I know, Paul. Everyone's a stumbling block to your path to the truth and your warm bed with Jordan Peterson. We get it. We understand what's going on.
Take some mushrooms, Paul. Calm
Jordan
down.
Peterson,
Next.
I can't stand Jordan Peterson anymore.
Veteran of the Collins as well. Always fun to listen to. The Machine Lies. Thank you so much for calling in. Go ahead with your question or comment.
Hey everyone, can everyone hear me?
You are so loud.
Yes, sir.
I'll lower.
Hey,
He's not allowed to.
hey, sorry. Hey, sorry about that. I couldn't test my mic before I came in here. I just clicked on the button
you're
there
good.
without testing it. Yeah.
got
So it's
you.
my bad on that. But yeah, I just wanted to share some historical facts and ask about a historical figure. I think the key thing is like when you're asking if who's responsible for something, you figure out key historical root causes, and then you prescribe some sort of ethical framework of how I guess how things should be done. And I think one of the most nefarious figures that I read about in history is this guy named John Maynard Keynes. And I
Based.
and I hear here in this book here by Paul Johnson called Modern Times, a very important book about the changes over the last 100 years in economics and politics, and it's an excellent read in history and stuff if anybody wants to get into it. But on page 29, he talks about how this guy founded basically set forth a plan called the Marshall Plan, in which he would to revitalize European industry by lending out money on credit, and this
it worked.
led to
It worked though. That worked.
Well, no.
Yeah,
no,
it did. It worked.
Whether it worked.
Solidarity
right
with
here-
Andrew. It worked, yeah, for sure.
It fucking worked, and
It did work.
Keynes is highly misunderstood. I think, in my purview.
Let's leave the caller finish.
Well-
Go ahead.
Well, it's disputed whether it worked or not. A lot of people called it a failure. Over here, it says a notable.
Did you know it's disputed that the sky is blue?
Yeah, because they didn't have a term for the color blue. I read about that shit too. But yeah,
And
anyways,
some of the people are just colorblind, so they just don't think the sky is blue. They're just the sky is blue deniers.
well, I mean, they
Andrew's
can't
one of those
deny that
people.
colors
Andrew's
exist.
one of those defected people.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
allergic to peanuts.
What even
so I
is
can't-
blue? Name the trait of blueness. While we're at it.
Sad. Please
at the real
continue,
debate.
machine.
Yeah. Yeah, well, one of his things that was considered a failure, I want to reiterate that it was considered by a lot of economists to be a failure, this Marshall Plan, you know.
By who?
Well, it says in this book that there was a prominent French economist who labeled it a failure and also
That
labeled
explains it.
his
Fucking French.
Well, I mean, as
Yeah.
Andrew explained previously, economists have never gotten anything right ever, so it's impossible for that to be correct.
That's true.
Yeah,
Well, wait, hang on. They do have good hindsight, just not good foresight.
True.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
Good
we're
machine.
talking about fractional reserve banking, and I just thought he was one of the key figures that set the whole thing off. And then also his idea of getting rid of the gold standard. You know, when he argued with Winston Churchill, it says that he said to Churchill, "We are shackling ourselves to gold," and Churchill replied, "We were quote unquote shackling ourselves to reality." You know, so
Yeah. Well,
so
the thing is, let me
You lost
respond to
that debate
something real
super
quick.
hard.
So on the Keynes front, Keynes would roll over in his grave if he understood how banking and credit in the modern day operates. That was not his plan at all. Okay, at all. No, so you could say it's possible that he put the wheels of implementation in, but it was not his plan to have these extensive lines of credit to the point of absurdity. That was not
In
what he
fact,
was postulating.
Keynes wanted to socialize all of investment.
It depends on which arc of Keynes we're talking about, but I mean, you know, fractional reserve banking was not invented by John Maynard Keynes. It existed for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years before that, ever since the dawn of banking. And you know,
I didn't say that he invented a fractional reserve banking. I just simply stated that he enacted the Marshall Plan, and then also he recommended moving out of the gold standard. So those were two things he recommended that I think historically have been challenged by many people, economists, and many brilliant thinkers throughout history. For the past 100 years, people have said to end those programs. Also, he was a member of the Fabian Society. You know, he was a Fabian socialist. He was also a member of the Cambridge Apostles with Bertrand Russell, in which they had platonic kind of like homosexual relationships.
Shout out
They
to
had
him.
like kind
Shout
of
out
an
to
occult.
him. What a king.
They had kind of an occult society called the Cambridge Apostles over there at Cambridge.
Is there a question?
Well, no, I was just asking if
Did I just hear
more
a pen
about
drop?
well, in a way, my question was answered partly by Andrew. I was just asking people's opinion on John Maynard Keynes.
Well, I
he
think
was
the
a
Marshall Plan was a great
nefarious
success,
figure.
and that you can pump huge amounts of money into industry to get it rolling again, and sometimes it's necessary. And he pointed this out many times, and many times hence we've used this successfully. Many people have modeled this all over the world, many governments, if they need to have an infusion of money and a huge extension of credit to industry. It's necessary. It's fucking necessary. I'm sorry.
Exactly,
When you deal with trillions of dollars in private industry, you have to have these large lines of credit. There's no way around that.
Yeah,
So,
I found
one of the greatest
I found
economists
here
in
who
all of
they
history.
said.
Some of the greatest contributions.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting that you say that the Marshall Plan has been challenged by tons of economists. It's really not true. It's actually probably one of those things.
It says right here. When the war in due course came, a young French historian, Etienne Mantoux.
I don't doubt that one person challenged it.
It's not even an economist. That's a historian.
Hold on. He pointed an accusing finger. You said nobody fucking challenged it.
I didn't say nobody. I don't think very
Your
many.
French economist is now a French historian, and he's French.
A French historian fucking challenged it.
I
So
think
you said nobody. You said nobody challenged it, and I just said, look, it's in this fucking book.
I didn't say nobody challenged it,
it.
but my position is, you know, it seems like the vast majority of economists have thought that it was a pretty good plan. Seems very successful. In regards to the gold standard, yeah, I mean, there's been some gold bugs that have, you know, remained. It's not a super popular position among monetary economists. It's very minority.
I would probably just read this book by Etienne Mantoux called The Carthaginian Peace or the Economic Consequences of Mr. Keynes. Have you read that book?
DM it to me and I'll read it. But one thing I did dive into was Keynesian economics. I did think that was important, especially going up against people who believe in Austrian style economic systems, right? So I think that these are keyed in points. I'm just saying that, listen, this should from a groundational level be logical to you, that if you want to expand your business, it's going to require lines of credit for money, period. And there's no way around that. You can't have expansion if you contract the money supply. Imagine you're having a business and you want to expand it, and you on your own contracted your own money supply. Would you be able to expand your business? The answer is no.
Do you believe in lending money on interest, even though it's forbidden in the Bible?
I'm absolutely against usury. Usury is different than just charging interest, though.
That would have been
what is the difference?
Oh yeah, what's the difference?
Wait, where's the threshold?
So
that is a good question.
Yeah, so there is a delineation. I thought about this myself, right? How could you ever lend money without attaching an interest to it, without it being usury? Usury is something which is specific and predatory, and it's designed to extend loans to people who can't actually pay them back, and you have the foreknowledge that you can't. Not that you'll make some money off the loan. That's not what the intention of usury actually is.
Totally different question. I'm just curious.
What interest rate would be the threshold?
It would have to. So it would have to vary. It would have. I mean, it would vary. It
wait,
would depend.
Andrew. I'm sorry. I don't really understand this. Why would any private bank which wants to maximize profit give out a loan that they think the person won't pay back? That's just a great way to lose money.
Well, then why don't you explain a payday loan service, which does it all the time?
Well, they charge an interest rate high enough that they can actually end up making money.
Yeah, but you have people who are operating inside of payday loan services right this second, which will charge a 600% plus interest rate on a short-term loan, knowing that the chances are fairly good the person they're giving the money to won't be able to pay it back. And so they can continuously attach interest to it so they can never really pay the loan back. So it started out as a $500 loan. Suddenly they're in debt to this person for $2,500 to $4,500. That's usury.
Okay, yeah. If you want to ban like payday lenders, I mean, I think this is pretty. When most people talk about banning,
yeah, but that's usury. Do you understand the difference? That's usury.
Well,
they're intentionally, predatorily making sure that the person they're taking their risk assessment is you're not going to be able to pay it back. That's the most likely scenario. And so down the road, we'll seize your tax returns, or we'll seize this, or we'll seize that.
I do think 500% interest rates are very ridiculous. Usually when people talk about banning usury, they're thinking about what every country that has banned usury has done throughout history and currently, which is banning interest on loans. That's what Saudi Arabia does, Iran does, and that's what used to happen in Italy.
And there's some sense to that. Okay, there can be some sense to that. But
Andrew, didn't Jesus knock over the tables of tax collectors?
Yes,
there weren't tax.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Paul, for that.
From what I understand,
well, I'm just pointing out there seems to be
money changers.
Money changers. Hush. Weren't these individuals that were essentially engaging in usury in front of the temple? Because there was a cost associated with even going into the church, right? Wasn't that the exploitive nature and the usury nature?
That's not how it's described. What was going on there is the usury was these people had to have access. They had to, right? So because they had to have access, charging them for the access was the usury portion. It wasn't avoidable, in other words. You know what I mean?
Right. And then there was the money changers that were like utilizing like barter from people so that they could have the money to go into the church.
I'm not sure that it's usury. And I understand the argument of the fine line, right? When do you know?
Right. I'm just curious
and when do you know when it's not? I think that predatory lending is pretty easy to spot. And so if you're taking a gamble that a person actually can't pay it back. And I think that there's a lot more of that than people want to admit, that even goes on at higher levels. So that's what usury really is. Not.
I mean, you could make the same argument.
I'll loan you $100 today if you give me $110 back next week. Is that usury? I don't think it is.
You could make the same argument about the housing situation that led up to the 08-09 situation, right? Like the individuals were being loaned homes, without actually checking up on anything because
that was
they just assumed they assumed that the values of the homes would rise, and so like, oh, we'll just mortgage it and we'll come out ahead anyways.
All right,
they did
I
that
hate to
because
cut, I
the
hate to cut the
government.
conversation up, but Machine Lies, thank you so much for calling in.
right
You
as
got a
we get
couple
back
words
to
you want to
George
say on the
Soros.
way out, but we got to get to our last caller.
Well, I just want to say that in this book here, Modern Times, it explains that many people found the Marshall Plan to be a failure and actually blamed World War II on the Marshall Plan because of what happened to Germany and all that stuff. But anyways, it's not my
the Marshall Plan happened after World War II. I think you're thinking about the Treaty of Versailles, or maybe the Great Depression.
The
Marshall Plan happened in response to the recovery from World War II. It helped the countries rebuild. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's what the book said. This guy, we got maybe his timeline a little. I mean, he's consulting French historians / economists, so I don't blame him. They're not a very
it said it blamed him for war with Germany. So so he's saying that I haven't read the book back in a long time. I'm just pointing out that many people in this book said that the Marshall Plan was a failure. It's a well-known book. I mean, I'm not saying like I'm an expert on these matters or anything like that. I was just trying to ask everybody's opinion on that.
Nobody is.
But,
like I just said, economics is fucking dog shit, and economists are dog shit, and they get everything fucking wrong. They really do get everything wrong.
But that French,
leftist
that French cat pointed out it was a disaster.
The problem is that something can be quote unquote successful, but you can't compare it to an alternate reality where that thing didn't happen.
Well,
right? So people will look in hindsight and say, "Oh, GDP increase or like profits increase."
That's all we got. We got it.
Unemployment
We're gonna run
change,
late,
etc.
Thank you so much, Machine Lies. Thank you to your friend as well for calling in. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, that's my brother. Yeah.
Nice.
Have a blessed one.
Thanks,
all right,
Machine Lies.
take it easy, everyone.
Give me the book. Amazing.
All right,
Scott, you can simulate a counterfactual. Like, it's not going to be perfect, but like people do that all the time.
All right, we got our last caller, also a veteran of the arena, Synth. Synth, go ahead. Question.
Where's your camera?
Yeah, I'm like in here. You want to see my cam? Look at this. Give me pitch black. Pitch black. Okay. So yeah, I don't know. It's wild. I guess the first question is, what's up with this deal of callers who call in and their question is like a 5-minute opening statement followed by like, what are you guys' thoughts on that? Like, what's up with that shit?
I guess
my
that
second,
just sounds good.
Yeah, true. I guess my real question, one of it's like directed to both Micah, or as I've learned his name is truly pronounced Mika and Andrew. I guess since Andrew's not here, I'll just ask it to Micah first, and maybe somebody can like throw it at Andrew. Oh, there he is. There he's back. Okay. Yeah. So Micah, the question for you is like, when you hear the argument that like taxation is theft, like what are your general responses to that? And the same question for Andrew.
Yeah, I mean that's clearly just a historically incoherent position. Property is a social construct, or as Pradhan best put it, theft. It makes no sense. We have to appropriate nature. The homesteading as some sort of natural form of the appropriation of nature is a completely ludicrous concept. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And so when people try to create some sort of abstract deontology that's around some sort of objective property rights that cannot be assailed by any sort of social system or democratic process, they're just repeating the same old trend in history of every single social system defending itself and declaring itself objective whenever it's clearly not.
And I guess the same question over to Andrew. Andrew, what's the what kind of responses or counter arguments come to mind when you hear the phrase taxation is theft?
Yeah, don't let Scott respond.
I don't think that taxation is theft. I think that there's some forms of taxation which are used as a form of theft to stop cross-generational wealth. There's a delineation point. It's a hard one to intuit out, but I don't think that taxing somebody's money when that money's already been paid for by their parents, for instance, I think that that's abhorrent. I don't see any particular reason to tax a person who's receiving it after their parents already paid the taxes on it just to give it to them. That seemingly is just a stripping of wealth. It's just a wealth transfer. But I don't think in general that having taxation for normative services is theft. In fact, it's probably necessary for society to operate. I can't think of how society could actually operate without it.
Okay,
right.
My second question is for Scott. The second question is for Scott, and it's like, why are you cosplaying as like a lesbian Rob Noor?
A lesbian Rob Noor?
Yeah. Think
Oh,
of that.
because
Think of that.
like you're just saying because like I painted my fingernails, I was bored.
No, I was thinking more of the hat. I just noticed the painted fingernails.
Oh,
No,
some dude had a beanie and he was like, we don't trust people with beanies, so I just grabbed my beanie.
No, I'm just fucking with you. I have like a real question related to the taxation of theft thing because it's kind of like it seems like it's got your attention. You wanted to respond. I guess my question for you is just like,
well, like it has nothing to do with the topic. It was just a design to like have a conversation with me or
no, I just
trigger me. It's fine.
Kind of wanted to just poke at Scott here. No. The question is just like when it comes to like argumentation ethics, and you've got this. I know you guys have got this like notion of like a performative contradiction. Do you think a performative contradiction entails that like the view that's being contradicted with is false, or do you just think it's like an example of hypocrisy?
Or do I just think it's an example of hypocrisy?
Yeah.
I mean, like if I was to go back to like Habermas's performative contradiction, right? Like I would say that if someone is engaging in a performative contradiction, then I must either assume that it is inherently false or that it makes absolutely no sense and that it's just a performance and that we're just meant to laugh at it. And that like the words are all gobbledygook. And so it's just haha funny.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right?
All right. Well, I think that answers the question. You guys have a good one. That's all my questions.
Wait, Synth.
I do want to add real quick.
Oh, you have a question for me?
Yeah, I have a question for the caller, which I never get to do as moderator. As long as we're going to make jokes about sexuality, first, I'd like to criticize you for not asking my pronouns. And second, I was wondering, did you come up with that joke while you're researching gorillas and Seacums? That was
no, I came up with it because you and Scott kind of look alike.
Oh, okay. Well, I do appreciate the call, Synth. We do. Hopefully,
love you too, Rob.
Rob Noor, you already stated that you're the most handsome moderator in the politics space, and so I feel like that's a great compliment to me.
Yeah.
Also, just real quick, Micah, like, yeah, Proudhon said, property is theft. He also said property is liberty, and he also said there's two different types of property. And he was also talking about landed gentry. So, like, it really doesn't.
He also said gays are straight, men are women. He said all kinds of shit.
I'm just saying.
Base. Wow, so many W's.
So if Rob is the most handsome moderator, where does that put Andrew?
Oh, I'm way low tier, bro.
Right.
It's at the lowest of the
Oh,
low
Andrew,
tier.
come on. Listen,
and it's only
you
because
rock
Mike
that
has never
Carhartt hat and
moderated
flannel every
Yeah,
time.
nobody does it better, right? Everybody wears a flannel. It's just a BPF impersonator.
That's fair. You
after all.
started the trend.
That's
Listen,
true.
That's true. Nobody's
My
ever
wife
worn a
makes me
flannel
a
before.
shirt for every topic. We got you down with SVB. Yeah, you know me. That was hers.
Every
You
single
know-
lesbian is actually just trying to be Andrew.
I mean, why wouldn't they be?
Andrew is just really like bigoted towards people in Alaska, and he's hoping that they don't come into the chat. Like he's hoping that none of the Alaskans that have been wearing flannel their entire lives
bigoted towards people who don't exist in Australia.
All
That's
right,
towards.
let's get to super chat. So there was one that came in on my Rumble, which I might as well read. From Lavin says blaming Trump for SVB is nonsense. If it's true that it's Trump's fault, then it's also true to say it's Biden's fault as well for not fixing the problem. For
Biden didn't have 60 people in Congress. Biden didn't have 60 people in Congress to pass the bringing back of the Dodd-Frank regulations that were repealed under Trump.
Well, did Trump have 60?
You're saying that
no, but he had Democrats
the Biden administration was handcuffed.
Well, I mean,
Democrats
would have supported that, right?
Yeah.
So he could have pushed for that. But I mean, it's clear it wasn't just Dodd-Frank.
It's a hindsight situation, right? Like, I mean, Sanders
it's not
super upset about the 2018 bill, and then he was fucking silent about it the last.
What do you mean? If it's not a hindsight situation, show us where you're on record. Show us where you're on record saying this bank was going to fail. Show us.
It seems like with hindsight we can still say they were wrong to do something. Even if they didn't know it was going to be so bad, right?
Can I ask a question to Phenomics and Micah particularly? Do you blame Barney Frank, who is the signator of the Dodd-Frank bill and then was working at Signature Bank?
No.
Sure, we'll blame him too. I don't give a fuck.
I'm just curious because
I'm primarily blaming the CV, but we can blame them too. Just spread the blame around. Honestly, give it to everybody except for me and Biden. Everybody else.
Who, by the way, Micah, as an economist, did you also fail to predict this event?
Oh yeah, so I actually basically full time make predictions because I just want to be constantly embarrassed. Now you know the rule of economics: never make a prediction,
because it's always wrong.
just talk about other things in hindsight with absolute confidence. Never make any predictions, and you can't lose. You can't.
All
lose.
right, before I get to the next super chat, seemingly unrelated to this conversation, though related to the after show with me, can you raise your hand if you supported lockdowns? Oh, Paul.
I mean, I could support lockdowns within specific contexts.
Thank you, Micah.
Just curious.
Why isn't your hand raised, Phenomics?
Sorry, what? I
Why
got
isn't
distracted
your
by
hand
chat.
raised?
I don't know what I'm supposed to be raising my hand
Just
for.
raise your fucking hand.
Did you
Trust me.
support
Did you support
lockdowns?
I support lockdowns.
Oh, yeah.
Just curious. Oh, that inflation's a bastard. It's funny how the predictions worked out since then. But I'm a moderator, not a debater. Let's go with some super chats. Penwell.
Oh, we're supposed to be careful
thank
on
you.
YouTube.
Penwell, I just said lockdown. That's all I said. There's many reasons for it. Penwell Music, thank you for becoming a new member. We really appreciate it. Next, Philip Hansen, $5. I can't crib Andrew's line here, but that is Andrew's favorite type of donation, one that doesn't even have anything to say. I made a special exemption for this next one. They didn't give any money, but I felt it was worth saying. Jim Bob puts in, PF is waiting for Jordan Peterson to write a book on economics.
Jim Bob's stuck in the past, man.
I chuckled.
Kane's already invented animal spirits.
Jim Bob is
Jordan
more
Peterson
obsessed
has
with
no
Jordan
room.
Peterson than anyone I've seen. Jordan Peterson is now utterly insane, as anyone who's on Twitter follows him.
Now, wait a minute. Did Vosh, through
Hang
the
on.
strength of his intellectualism, turn you off?
No, because PF
No, it
Young's
was more
last
like his
video was
charisma.
about Jordan Peterson, just so you know. Don't let him lie to you. His last video about Jordan Peterson, by the way.
And what was it titled, Andrew?
It was titled, I love Jordan B. Peterson. I'm a simp for Jordan B. Peterson.
That's funny. I you know what? Just to go back, I think it would be better if we all were locked down so that this could not happen anymore. The reason I support lockdowns is because I have social anxiety and I don't like getting bullied like on these big streams.
Well, here
So
you
good.
are, a glutton for punishment.
I
Next,
seriously don't know what Jordan Peterson's gonna write on economics since Kane's already invented animal spirits.
True.
sick burn. Colin Mark becomes a new member. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. Next, Redfish for $19.99. Hell, we'll say 20. Says absolutely nothing. Thank you so much.
Don't you
Redfish.
give that son of a bitch a penny. Don't you give him a fucking penny. Nothing.
I'm
It's
sorry.
$19.99. He couldn't even round up because he's a. That's why. That's why.
No, jeez. Next, we got veganism for 11 Canadian things. Love the Earthship background, Scott. I think she likes your Hobbit, the Shire.
Earthship? What is an Earthship?
Right. I don't know, man. I appreciate it nevertheless. And whatever
She
funny
ships
money that
stuff.
is.
American Nacho for 10 real dollars says, I still have no idea who caused the collapse, and I came here tonight hoping to find someone to blame, so that's disappointing. But I'm still here to crack some cold ones open with the boys.
American Nacho, it was interest rate hikes and
You
some
know
regulation
who to
and moral
blame,
hazard.
Nacho. Just go and look to Hungary, and you will
Greg
find
Baker. I don't know.
them.
Like if you want someone to blame, Greg Baker.
American Nacho, call Falser. He seemed to be on it. So, OG Snoop, thank you so much for becoming a new member. I know Snoop's been busy. My son watches this show called Storybot. Snoop Dogg was on it today. So glad you took time out from that, Snoop, to go ahead and become a member of the Crucible. We appreciate it. Jordan Lofgren for $5 says, Micah, how much student loan debt are you taking on in order to tell everyone else how to make good financial decisions?
Roasted.
This is amazing.
That's a $15 super chat value for $5.
It's funny because I have zero debt, but that's amazing.
Wait, how do you have zero debt?
You already said it was already explained that he is being held captive by the Federal Reserve,
I'm literally
right?
by the gold.
You're
Like I
paying
don't
for
think I don't know.
Wait,
if you
Mika,
understand
how do you actually have zero debt?
grants.
General?
You can
No,
get scholarships.
You're paying his student loans. What he's letting you know.
Yeah, you
That's
are
what
right
it sounds
now.
like. Who?
Yeah,
Wait, are
that's
these
right.
private grants or public grants?
Combination. But anyway,
You're also possible. Hang on.
I made zero.
Hey,
I made
hey,
zero.
hold on.
Paid with my tax
Pause.
dollars to be
Pause,
lectured by Mika on this stream.
Pause. Hey guys, I don't know how to
Good
change
investment.
it so that the chat on the side doesn't show up on my screen on Twitch. But if we could avoid using slurs, synth, and other people in like your little thing, I would appreciate it because like I can't edit that out. Please don't do that.
Jordan, I think
Right.
I think what's amazing about this is I made zero personal financial decisions. I made zero recommendations whatsoever.
All right. So
to anybody.
can we kick Machine Lies out or of this little chat off to the
I
side?
booted them both. I booted
That's
them
rough,
both.
man.
I
That's
appreciate
rough.
it.
I
Sorry.
wasn't
I just like
paying
I don't want to
attention.
get taken down on Twitch. He's using.
Yeah, I
F
wasn't
slur.
paying attention to the private
I
chat. I'm
disavow
sorry.
that, by the way. I disavow.
That's
what
fine.
Machine
It's
Lies
just
said.
like
If the ADL is watching.
All right.
George
Jackson should
Soros
never
won't let
use
me
the
get away
F
with
word.
that.
So we learned
We
a lot
already knew
about
that,
Micah's
Scott.
personal finances tonight, so that's good.
He
American
could, well,
Nacho.
I mean, he could be lying though. Right?
for
I'm just saying, he
$5.
could be not telling the truth. There could be an element of he's full of shit and he just didn't want to answer to that and be a hypocrite. That could be what's going on.
No, he gave
Andrew,
the
when
worst
are you buying
response,
a
which is that
slave
you're
plantation?
paying for it.
That's
Andrew, when are
bad.
you buying a slave plantation in South America so we can get Crucible brand coffee?
Well, I've been looking into it, and it turns out it costs a little bit more money than I thought. You know, these fuckers don't work for the zero that I thought that they were really going to be going. I thought I could pay them in like pocket lint, but they're like, we need food and housing and basic needs. It's pretty ridiculous, really. You know,
I would like to
ridiculous.
disavow that publicly in case the SPLC is watching.
American Nacho for $5, also inquiring about Brucible brand coffee. Says, I need a subscription to Brucible brand coffee. So Andrew's diligently at work trying to find cheap labor to.
No. Well, Paraplegic just needs to stop fence sitting and come over to the Crucible and abandon Owen Benjamin and make Brucible brand coffee because we'll actually treat him well and he'll make more money anyway. So that's how that should work. And then I just want the icing on the cake is I just want to show the Brucible brand as being stolen from Owen just to kind of like rub it in his face a little bit because I'm a prick, right? Just that's all. That's all I'm saying. And take it or leave it. Take it or leave it.
We got FB for $2 says Orthodox Christians are based and only betas disagree. Does anyone disagree?
I disagree.
Beta.
I will accept the beta classification.
Hey man, I went to Orthodox Church. I sent Andrew a picture of me at Orthodox Church. You can confirm.
No, you didn't. You actually just sent me a picture of you standing in front of an Orthodox
you think I would
church.
get dressed up in a suit just to go stand in front of the church and not attend it? You actually think that's in my realm of possibility?
Yes.
That sounds like a huge
It
W.
absolutely is.
Yes.
But it wasn't in this
Yes,
case.
I think he would do that to own me in a second and to feel like you're holding up your end of the bargain. I didn't actually see you with a single priest or in a coffee hour or at
I wasn't
a
going to
liturgy.
embarrass my friend
I
who
didn't
brought
see
me.
any
You
of
actually-
that. I only
Okay.
saw you with a sign. That's all I saw you with. And I feel like you need to go again, go to the liturgy, and then afterwards show us the pictures from the coffee hour.
Well, why don't you tell us?
Dude, wait,
what
hold
was
on. He has to commit to the liturgy and like the mass and
I already
the
did the
after
liturgy, and my
That's like
back
a whole
was sore from
fucking
standing up
day.
and down so much.
That's like as someone that grew up
You
Catholic,
you
right?
should
If I'm gonna
know-
go to an
wait,
Orthodox church, like
hang
I
on.
just show up
PF
right on
Young
time.
already, right? He's talking about like prostrations are hard for him or something. Come on, PF. Come on. Prostrations aren't hard for you, bro. Get it going up and down and up and down. Come on. That's easy for you, right?
Andrew, go to hell.
I don't believe in it.
That's fair.
OG Snoop, who's a new member, thank you again, Snoop Dogg, says for $5. I really enjoy economics and particularly the banking sector. However, I missed the whole gladiator brawl. So as elaborate as possible, Mike, what is debt?
I love that
still
all the
ask
questions.
what a debit card versus
I like how
credit card
everything's
was. I
related
didn't
to
get
me.
an
This is
answer.
amazing. It's really suiting my ego. So, I mean, debt's something you owe. It's usually money. It's existed, since thousands of years BC. In the modern economy, debt is
Uh-oh.
so they create a liability and an asset in their
You
ledger.
cut out right as you were about to say what
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was in the modern economy, in your opinion.
So in the modern economy,
The
it is
optimal time to cut
it-
out.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear
Yes,
me?
you're
No.
good.
Yeah,
Go
you're
ahead.
good.
No.
Okay. In the modern economy, it is created by private banks. It's new money. It's created in the form of credit. They enter into their ledger an asset and a liability. It is basically the level of debt is equal to basically the maximal amount that people are capable of repaying in the future at this current interest rate. And every time the interest rate is changed, it changes the level, the total amount of credit that can be extended profitably at a specific given time. It's probably about as
All right.
elaborate as I can without a more specific question.
Okay. Well, I thought that was a generous amount of time you gave to the question. So, all right, that's it for the super chats. We really appreciate everyone. I really do. Particularly, Andrew, am I wrong about this? We reached 10K subscribers during this show. Is that correct?
Yes, that is
Let's
correct.
go.
So we hit the
Hell yeah, bro.
10,000 subscriber milestone. We did do a little bit of early celebration because of time constraints. I thought I was going to be traveling more this week than I ended up doing. So I did a super show a little bit earlier to celebrate. If you missed it, you'll be able to catch it on Odyssey. Also, I'm going to be releasing that, I think, tomorrow. Tune in for the Trash Talk extravaganza. The debates are going on as usual, starting first of the week. We never back off on those, but I had a bunch of stuff going on this week I had to get to. So this is going to be a great month, in fact, for debates. Even Phenomics is going to be coming on for a vegan debate. So that ought to be pretty good. I did block him on Twitter because he annoyed me because he was going after a word instead of the fucking context. And yeah, so, but anyway, whatever. He can still debate on the channel. I don't fucking care. And then the last thing I'll say is that Paul sucks. He always is going to suck. He's a centrist scumbag, and we have to pull him over to the side of the light.
So the sheep
Just saying.
says to the lion.
So I will, Andrew, do you need to shout yourself out of your channel on anymore? I'm going to go around the horn.
No, I'm good, dude. I'm good.
Thank you so much for special thanks to Andrew for actually popping in. We had some dirty right wingers drop out at the last minute, so it was nice to have at least one right winger. Come on,
have
Paul,
to lift this whole show up on my fucking shoulders. It's ridiculous. No, I'm kidding. This has been a great show. The arena. I've enjoyed watching it very much.
Thank you. I've fun doing it. So, Paul, you want to shout yourself out where people can find you?
No, I don't want anyone who's watching this show to watch.
All right, Phenomics. Would you like to shout yourself out and where people can find you?
Boy, that backfired, didn't it, Paul? That backfired.
Nothing.
I'm Phenomics on YouTube. That's the main place you're gonna find me. I also have a Twitter, EA Phenomics, just like that. On Twitter, it's at EA and then that. Yeah, if you want to come see some lefty effective altruist content, go there.
Hang on, Paul, shout your fucking channel out.
If I wanted to see lefty effective ultras content, I'd go watch a Sam Bankman-Fried interview. Okay.
Sounds like wizardry, Paul. Are you going to shout yourself out?
The channel is called PF Young and has all the right answers. Thank you.
Micah came late, boo. But seriously, thanks for coming. You want to shout yourself out? You didn't get a chance to at the beginning. So
y'all can actually just look at.
Moving on.
Fuck his shout out.
Fuck
his shout out.
You could type microrefund.com in and you'll find my website. It has a link to all my social medias.
Micah, George Soros is shutting you down. You're going to need to repeat.
Oh, that'd be so cringe. My newsletter's there. I read a news like bi-weekly newsletter on economics, and you can also find my YouTube channel. Maybe I'll post more stuff. Maybe me and Scott can debate or somebody like that. So maybe I'll post more stuff there in the future.
Okay, Scott, you want to shout yourself out?
Yeah, I am Scott from Fabian Liberty. You can find us primarily on Twitch, but also YouTube. Please, you got 10K subscribers. I can get some love. On Rumble, Twitter, same thing. It's Liberty_Fabian, but you just search Fabian Liberty.
Go subscribe. Scott does have a lot of interesting guests. Even if you absolutely loathe his ANCAP takes, he does have interesting guests. And Kaz, who is a recurring kind of, I don't know if you'd call him like a character between the Crucible and Made by Jim Bob and several other channels. That's the community that he kind of came out of. So, and we've also always had
he's a moderator in my Discord.
We've also always had an open Discord between Scott's Discord and the Crucibles. So I recommend checking it out. A lot of interesting people over there. Not Scott, but everybody else there is pretty interesting. So
but also, if you're in my chat right now,
if you're in my chat right now, also make sure you subscribe to the Crucible so that trolls don't get him right under 10K, right? Let him keep that victory. And also for everyone watching, I suggest that you immediately go to PF Young's YouTube channel. Don't subscribe. I just want you to go into the comments where he's talking about Jordan Peterson and make fun of him in the worst ways possible that don't violate TOS. So yeah.
All right, I'm gonna shout myself out here for a second as well.
I'm clipping that as brigading and sending that to YouTube. That's fine.
So I'm on Rumble. I'm gonna put the link.
So don't violate TOS. Don't dislike.
Don't violate TOS. small after
Sorry.
show. I do have some stuff to do here this evening, but there's the link to my Rumble for this particular show. We'll be ending here, and then if anyone wants to stick around for a couple minutes to hear my thoughts on the topic, we could do that. My YouTube channel looks like it's in the toilet, that it got banned. I'm a bad guy. YouTube told me I say things I shouldn't. So I think I just wanted to say,
but it's not banned. It's not banned yet.
Well, it's
privated
two
with two
strikes,
strikes.
completely privated and being looked at. So I lost 3 more videos today, which they generously didn't strike. They just removed. So even though it's set to private, they're still looking at it because I probably got flagged. So I would say the chances of me getting a strike and the 3rd strike in the next 3 months, pretty high. Probably the end of that channel, but that's okay. What I wanted to say was consider following me on on Rumble or on Comfy.stream. Comfy is an excellent platform that was created by Andrew that's getting better every day. And you should also consider following all of our panelists here on a varying amount of platforms if they have it, because literally all it takes is an algorithm or someone in bad faith flagging you or some shit like that, and you could lose access to like content that people are doing. So support smaller communities like Comfy.stream or Rumble that are actually doing that stuff. So,
Also, you'll only be able to find this broadcast on
short form
Rumble because it will be this message will self-destruct.
That's right. So because of YouTube's assholery, we will be deleting this as we always do. So the only place you can find each episode of the arena is on my Rumble. So if you're like, I really missed Paul looking like an asshole that whole panel, well, you can still see that months from now, right? When you come to Rumble. Paul, I think he did great, by the way.
He who speaks the truth looks like the biggest asshole.
That's true.
That's not why you look like the biggest
You know who
asshole.
said that?
Paul.
That's correlation, not
Paul,
causation.
did
Hey,
you
why
say that?
is your fucking website down every time I try and go to it?
Whose?
Yours, Andrew. Comfy.
It's not down.
Comfy.stream.
Yeah. I'm on it right now. It's not down.
You should just go to mine.
I'm always stuck on
It's
it.
much better.
I
Just
get
go to
stuck on
mine.
the checking if the site connection is secure screen.
Well, I'm sorry that you use a bad internet browser because you suck.
So we're bought out by Soros, but Soros is the one checking in on you, making sure you don't go to certain places. Huh?
Can I just admit something to everyone right now? I actually am not funded by Soros, but I am funded by David Koch.
Great.
Oh, okay.
A true American. So thank you. So, all right. This message will self-destruct in about 5 minutes. If you want to turn into the after show, it'll be at that link that I just put there in the chat on my Rumble. But thank you to all the panelists. Thank you to Andrew. Thank you to the team at the Crucible to help put this together. I really appreciate you all. And we will see you next week. Thanks so much.